Honey, please go visit Sarah. She really needs us right now. Leave me alone. I'm at a critical point in my career, and this could be my chance to finally get that promotion. What will you do if I lose this opportunity? Our standard of living will never improve. I don't mind. I was planning to get a part-time job anyway, so I can take care of Sarah's needs. But Roger just said, "You just don't understand anything." Taylor, don't you think that's a bit off? We need more data before we can conclude anything. So, what should we do? I asked, and both of them looked stern. Whatever the reason, if she's being given some unclear medication, we need to address that first. All right. But what should I do? What can I do? Then Nancy said, "Call an ambulance." An ambulance? Please, Taylor. This is your responsibility. Bro emphasized to me. In the meantime, we'll investigate that doctor. Right. For our sweet niece, we'll stop at nothing. My name is Taylor, and I'm 37 years old. I live with my husband Roger and our daughter Sarah. I've been married to Roger, who was a colleague at work, for 13 years. Sarah just started middle school this spring, so I was thinking about getting a part-time job and changing our routine a bit. We thought we were living peacefully enough, but really, until very recently. Mom, my leg hurts. One day during spring break, Sarah came home and suddenly said this. Oh my, what's wrong? Where does it hurt? It's from my knee. It feels dull and deep inside. It's rare for Sarah to say something like this. Realizing we needed to see a doctor, we decided to visit the nearby Smith Family Clinic. We've been going to the Smith Family Clinic since we moved here after getting married. We've been under their care since the days of the previous doctor. Now, the daughter of the previous doctor, Dr. Charlene, is the head of the clinic, looking after the health of the townspeople. We are one of those families. When Dr. Charlene saw Sarah's condition, her expression clouded. Is something wrong? I asked. Well, let's take an X-ray to be sure. She suggested. Sarah looked at me anxiously. It's going to be okay, I said, sending her off. And then, the results came back. This isn't good, Dr. Charlene said with a serious look. What do you mean by not good? We'll discuss it in detail later. But, I tilted my head and Dr. Charlene continued. She needs to be hospitalized for a while. When Sarah was admitted, I was called in alone and was told clearly. Sarah has osteosarcoma. This is a type of pediatric cancer. Osteosarcoma. Pediatric cancer. Hearing these words was enough to scare me. Osteosarcoma reminded me of a comic I once read, where the protagonist had it. I asked fearfully, does this mean she might need to have her leg amputated or something like that? In the comic, the protagonist was told that. No, I don't think it will come to that, but if we leave it untreated, it could become very serious. So, let's start treatment early. I had no choice but to trust Dr. Charlene's words. When it came to treatment, I had no other recourse. And that was the same for my husband, Roger. When I first told Roger about Sarah's illness, he said to me, That's tough, but it'll be all right. Let's leave it to Dr. Charlene. Then he went to bed, saying he had a busy day ahead. Honestly, our relationship as a married couple was far from ideal. I found myself convincing myself that maybe this is just how normal families are. We've been married for 13 years. Since Sarah was born, I've been more of a mother than a wife, and I knew Roger no longer saw me as a woman. Gaining weight was part of that reason. There was a reason for it, but it wasn't something I could control. Now, we were more like a family with a child named Sarah, living quietly together rather than a husband and wife. Still, when I heard about our daughter's hospitalization, I thought he could have shown some surprise or concern as a father. Meanwhile, Sarah was upset that she couldn't attend her middle school entrance ceremony. "Mom, how long do I have to stay in the hospital?" "Well, it might take a while." That's all I could say. Honestly, that was all I could tell her. It's boring. I was supposed to start middle school, and now I can't even make friends. Hearing that pained my heart. Sarah had planned to join a sports club and have fun in middle school, but her school life had stumbled right from the start. "By the way, Mom." "Yes?" "Dad never visits me. I can't even see my friends, and the only people I see are you and Dr. Charlene. It's so boring," Sarah said, looking lonely. That was true. Sarah hadn't been able to see anyone recently. Even though it would be nice to have friends visit her, the Smith family clinic didn't allow it. "It's an important time right now." Sarah was given an 4 for her treatment, promoting a certain level of rest, though not absolute. "I wonder if it's really such a critical time." As an amateur, I couldn't understand. And meanwhile, to Roger. "Please, can you go visit Sarah?" I asked him, but his response was, "Sorry, but I'm really busy right now. I don't have time for this." "It's not about me, it's about Sarah," I retorted. "It's okay if you neglect me, but Sarah is your daughter. How can you just ignore her?" "Stop it. Right now, I'm at a crucial point where I might get a promotion. If I miss this chance, what will you do? Our life will remain stagnant." "I don't mind that. I was planning to start a part-time job, and we can think about Sarah's future together." But Roger said, "You don't understand anything." Ending the conversation. "You don't understand anything," was one of Roger's habitual phrases towards me. He had always said that. Our relationship had been shaky since we started dating at work, and his attitude shifted when I introduced him to my brother while considering marriage. I lost my parents in a car accident when I was in high school. Since then, my older brother Melville has been like a guardian to me. By the way, my brother is a veteran nurse. It had been his dream for a long time to become a strong male nurse who could handle jobs that might be difficult for female nurses. And his wife, my sister-in-law Nancy, is a little older than my brother. To outsiders, they might seem like an unusual couple, but I've always thought they were perfect for each other. And they truly look so happy together. I've always thought that having a marriage like theirs would be nice. They are both workaholics and don't have children, so they've adored Sarah since she was born. As I was thinking about my life with Roger, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't told my brother and his wife about Sarah. Oh no, what am I doing? I was certainly shaken by the sudden events, but to think I hadn't contacted the two people who always worry about Sarah. I hurried to contact them. They responded immediately. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Nancy and my brother shouted through the tablet screen. "Sorry, I was just so upset." "Well, that's understandable. By the way, is it true that Sarah has pediatric cancer, osteosarcoma? Is she really all right at that clinic?" Nancy tilted her head. "What do you mean? First of all, was the diagnosis made just from an X-ray?" "Sorry, I'm not well versed in this." I realized I had made a mistake as they exchanged glances. When they talk to each other, they can get quite technical, but I'm just a layperson. I tend to forget that sometimes. "Oh, sorry. So, what are they doing for her now?" She's hospitalized and getting daily for drips. They said this time is critical. They exchanged worried looks again. Taylor, that sounds a bit strange. What's strange about it? I'm sorry, but just hearing about it, that method seems medically unsound. Is that so? I tilted my head. To diagnose pediatric cancer or osteosarcoma, you need more than just that. What about blood tests? CT scans? You need various data to make such a diagnosis. My brother chimed in, agreeing. And to hospitalize her immediately and start treatment like that. It seems too off to me. So, what should we do? When I asked, my brother's expression turned stern. First of all, you should stop that treatment immediately. Yes, without a proper diagnosis, you can't administer the right medication. Doing something based on such a diagnosis is strange. Now that you mention it, that might be true. And even if the diagnosis of pediatric cancer is correct, treating her at your local clinic is absurd. My local clinic. Now that you mention it, that's right. There are general hospitals around here, right? Even our place, when dealing with pediatrics, you need proper treatment. You can't just handle it at a clinic. She should be taken to a general hospital. Ah, now that you mention it. Indeed, that's true. What was I thinking? When Sarah was born, wasn't it the same? Smith Family Clinic couldn't handle the delivery, so we were transferred to a major hospital under the guidance of the previous doctor. Thanks to that, both Sarah and I survived. To think I had forgotten such a thing, it's truly shameful. So, what should we do now? For whatever reason, if she's being given such dubious treatment, we need to address that first. I understand. But what should I do? What can I do? Then Nancy said, call an ambulance. An ambulance? Even in town clinics, when they can't handle a case, they often call an ambulance to transfer the patient to a larger hospital. Please, Taylor. This is your responsibility. Bro emphasized to me. In the meantime, we'll investigate that doctor. The word investigate made me pause. What does that mean? Yes, for our dear niece, we won't hesitate to use any means. She's like a daughter to us too. If we don't do our best now, when will we? Hearing Bro and Nancy's supportive words brought tears to my eyes. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. It's okay. By the way, where is Roger? Nancy's question made me tilt my head. Huh? Roger isn't doing anything even though it's a serious matter involving his daughter? Well, Roger is currently overwhelmed with the possibility of becoming a department manager, so he hasn't been able to come to the hospital. The two of them looked at each other and nodded as if they had a realization. Anyway, you call 911 and make sure Sarah can be transferred to the hospital here. Understood. I quickly rushed to the Smith Family Clinic and headed towards Sarah's room. But as I opened the door, what came into my sight was Sarah looking in pain. What happened? I thought, trying to press the nurse call button, but then I remembered the conversation earlier. That's right, 911. I called from inside the hospital. Excuse me, this is the Smith Family Clinic, but my daughter's condition seems strange. The confusion on the other end of the line was palpable, wondering why I was calling from inside a clinic. I'm sorry, but please, we need your help. Please. Repeating my desperate plea, they seemed to sense the urgency. The ambulance arrived shortly. At the same time, another car arrived. It was Nancy's car. From the hospital room window, I saw it pull up in front of the clinic as the ambulance's siren faded. Several paramedics got out of the ambulance. I hurriedly waved from the window. "Over here! Over here!" Responding to my signal, the paramedics entered the hospital. "What is this? What's going on?" A nurse from the clinic rushed out in confusion. Then Nancy, dressed in her white coat, got out of her car and said, "It's an emergency." She ran towards our room. "Nancy! Sarah is." "Taylor, where is Sarah?" Nancy immediately went to Sarah's side, her face turning pale as she saw the 4-bag. She quickly removed the needle from Sarah's arm and checked her pulse and other vital signs before explaining the situation to the paramedics. "I see. This is serious. We need to hurry." The paramedics understood and placed Sarah on a stretcher. Hearing the commotion, Dr. Charlene rushed into the room. "What are you doing? Why is there an ambulance here? And why Sarah? Who are you? How can you do this without my permission as her primary doctor?" Dr. Charlene glared at both me and Nancy after her outburst. Nancy didn't back down and glared back at Dr. Charlene, saying, "I'm Taylor's sister-in-law, Sarah's aunt. And I'm also a doctor at Central Hospital." Dr. Charlene was shocked and trembled at those words. "The current symptoms Sarah is experiencing are clearly due to an overdose of this 4-drip. What on earth were you thinking?" Dr. Charlene's face turned pale as she looked at the 4-bag in Nancy's hand. "What is going on here?" I asked. "Well, at the very least, we can guess why Sarah is showing these symptoms now. Anyway, we should head to Central Hospital." "All right." "And you?" Nancy pointed at Dr. Charlene. "I have some serious questions for you later. Prepare yourself, because you've done this to my precious niece." Then, I heard Dr. Charlene click her tongue. It was the first time I'd seen her act this way. "Let's hurry," Nancy said, and I quickly followed everyone as we left the scene. However, as I passed by Dr. Charlene, I clearly heard her mutter, "Useless people like her, managing to get support like this." It was a low, resentful voice. I never imagined she felt this way about me. "Come on, let's go," Nancy said, and I got into the car. When we finally arrived at Central Hospital's emergency room, Sarah was promptly treated, and her previously lifeless condition quickly improved. "Why on earth was she given such a large dose of this stuff?" The paramedics and doctors were stunned as they examined the 4-bag that had been brought in with Sarah. It was a type of infusion used in treatment, but not something administered in a single day. "Right after being admitted? So instead of helping her recover, she was hospitalized to worsen her condition?" Each incredulous comment from the surrounding doctors shocked me further. "So Dr. Charlene, but why? She was supposed to have been taking good care of her." When I explained that Sarah had been admitted for a suspected osteosarcoma, the doctors quickly conducted tests. However, the doctor who performed the CT scan looked alarmed. "Osteosarcoma? That's nonsense. This is just arthritis. Ridiculous. How could such a basic misdiagnosis be made?" The emergency room doctor was furious. Is it really that simple to distinguish between the two? I wondered in amazement. No, it's not that straightforward. It's impossible for a layperson to judge. Dr. Charlene must have used that to deceive me. Anyway, we have a private room available in our hospital, so let's monitor her closely until she recovers. When Bro said this, "A private room?" I was surprised. "It's okay. It's available now and will cover the costs." I had my concerns, but Sarah's life was more important. That night, I set up a cot in the private room to stay with Sarah. Thanks to the treatment, Sarah regained consciousness and was frightened, wanting me to stay with her. I resolved to stay by her side, not knowing what might happen next. Later that night, it was after Sarah had fallen asleep. As I began to drift off, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. I immediately woke up but pretended to be asleep. Then, I heard the door to the room open. Someone was approaching quietly. I thought I could finally do something for that person. It was Dr. Charlene's voice. If it comes to this. I heard the sound of rummaging through a bag. Then she took out a small vial and a syringe. I readied myself to act and watched closely. Dr. Charlene opened the vial and drew some liquid into the syringe. Then, as Dr. Charlene tried to grab Sarah's arm. What are you doing? I sprang up and lunged at Dr. Charlene, pinning her down. With a startled cry, bottles and syringes scattered across the floor. Heavy. It's suffocating. Were you awake? I'm not just awake. Get off me, you're too heavy. My weight was almost 1.5 times that of Dr. Charlene, if not double. Struggling as she was, Dr. Charlene couldn't move at all. Amid our commotion, Sarah woke up and cried out in shock. What's happening? Why? I turned to Sarah and said, Sarah, call the nurse. Got it, Sarah said as she frantically pressed the call button over and over. Soon, we could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from the nurse's station on that floor. The door opened and the lights came on. What on earth is going on here? It was Bro who spoke. Then, we heard Dr. Charlene click her tongue again. Taylor, well done, Bro said as he strapped Dr. Charlene's hands and feet with bands. She can't move now. Picking up the medicine bottle she had dropped, Bro's face twisted with anger. What were you planning to do with my niece's life? Bro's anger was palpable. Because you were going to take her away from our clinic, I wanted to make things easier for her, to make it less painful somehow. Because of that, I had to act quickly. Act quickly? That means... The ambiguity of her words made my imagination run wild with fear. Seeing my reaction, Bro spelled it out. In other words, this person was planning to take Sarah's life, despite being a doctor. Suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe. What were you? Dr. Charlene, what were you going to do to me? Sarah cried out, her voice trembling with tears. Then, the door opened again. Nancy. And someone else was behind her. Oh, so she finally showed up. Finally? I figured if I did this, she would come directly. That's why we moved her to a private room. We didn't want to disturb the other patients. And then, Nancy gestured for the person behind her to enter. We hastily investigated, but it didn't take long to get the answer. Right, Roger? I didn't understand why Roger was there. What is this, Melville, Nancy? Why call me at this hour? Oh, Roger, it's too late. They figured out everything we did. What? Charlene, why are you here? And why are you in such a state? It seemed that Roger had just noticed Dr. Charlene, who was now bound and lying on the floor. Roger? Charlene? You two call each other by first names? I screamed as Bro held me back. Oh, right. Sarah was listening. It's okay, Mom, Sarah shouted. If we're going to do this, I want to know everything. After all, the reason I'm here, the reason I suffered, the reason I couldn't attend middle school immediately, It's all because of Dad and Dr. Charlene, isn't it?
Sarah, you're very perceptive. Nancy gently stroked Sarah's shoulder and back.
I'm a middle schooler now. I need to understand these things. It's better to know than to be kept in the dark. Please, Mom.
I was confused. And I was furious at my own helplessness. Nancy held up the medicine she had picked up and confronted Dr. Charlene.
You brought the medication, didn't you? You must have known what would happen to this child's body if injected at this concentration,
Nancy said, her hands gloved in latex. Of course, it was for evidence preservation.
Someone's here to see you.
More visitors entered the spacious room. The size of the room was truly a blessing. The visitors flashed their police badges at Roger and Dr. Charlene, declaring firmly,
We're the police. Charlene, you're under arrest for the crime committed. Roger, you're coming with us for abetting her.
Roger, hearing this, instinctively tried to flee.
Hold it! You can't just run away.
Bro's large, strong hand gripped Roger's shoulder.
I've been looking after Taylor ever since our parents died, trying to keep the family happy. I thought I could trust you to do the same, but what have you done to your own child?
Bro shouted as Nancy brought another person into the room.
Yes, we were asked to expedite the investigation at top speed. It took some days, but we finally uncovered the truth. This man has been embezzling quite a bit from his company. Embezzlement?
I blurted out, and Roger averted his gaze.
Yes, they're from a detective agency. They were hired to investigate urgently. But Roger was about to become a manager. He was always busy and rarely came home, not even visiting our child in the hospital.
The detective continued calmly.
Actually, it was the opposite. He was supposed to become a manager, but the promotion was put on hold once suspicions of embezzlement arose. That can't be. He never said anything.
I couldn't believe it.
He wanted the insurance money to cover the embezzled amount. Insurance money? He took out a $200,000 insurance policy on your daughter.
I couldn't immediately grasp what that meant.
So, Roger, you were planning to cover it with Sarah's life? I had no choice. Without it, I would be kicked out of the company. What are you saying?
I raised my hand towards Roger impulsively. My large hand slapped his cheek, knocking him to the ground.
You've really put on weight since the old days. That's why I'm no longer attracted to you. This has nothing to do with that. Even if I've gained weight, you've always been drawn to the beautiful Dr. Charlene. Yes, you got fat after having kids.
I was at a loss for words. I wanted to stay beautiful too. But
I couldn't help it. I got sick when I was pregnant. Yes, Taylor's kidney got damaged during pregnancy. Since then, she's struggling with weight gain.
Nancy defended me.
That's beside the point. Dr. Charlene was there to comfort me.
The police sighed upon hearing this.
That's enough. What's important is that he tried to take his daughter's life, and his wife asked for her help. We'll take them both into custody. I understand your anger, but you don't want to be charged with assault, do you?
I realized the seriousness.
We'll try to keep you out of trouble. You have enough to handle with your child. Yes, but please, answer me. Didn't you love Sarah?
I asked Roger.
She was cute at first. But as you started gaining weight, I couldn't help but think that Sarah might end up like you someday. And honestly, I just stopped caring.
What? Dad, is that really how you thought of me? So, you decided I wasn't worth it anymore? Sarah started crying right then and there. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hugged Sarah tightly. It's because of Mom.
No, it's not Mom's fault. Mom has always done what's best for me. Even a middle schooler can see that. Dad just wants to blame everything on Mom for what he did. I don't even want to call him Dad anymore. He can do whatever he wants.
Yes, that's for the best. Nancy agreed.
And you were the director of the Smith Family Clinic, weren't you? For a healthcare professional to do something like this, even if it was an attempt, you can never return to this industry. You've thrown away your entire career for this man? You wouldn't understand.
Dr. Charlene spat out the words bitterly.
I worked so hard to take over this clinic. But Roger was the only one who saw me as a woman. Do you understand that feeling? Of course not. I'm not you. I put in a lot of effort.
Unlike you. I really tried to approach this person. Bro nodded at Nancy. Then, Dr. Charlene groaned and fainted on the spot. Nancy checked her pulse and condition.
She's okay,
she assured us, and had her taken away by the police. Then, I turned to Roger and unleashed my anger.
I'll have the divorce papers prepared by the lawyer. You don't care about us anymore, do you? If you don't care, then don't ever get involved again. We'll be seeking compensation and child support through the divorce proceedings. I don't ever want to see you again, so pay it all at once.
I never imagined I could say something like this so calmly. It must have been all the pent-up emotions inside me. Roger glared at me resentfully. But I wouldn't back down.
Goodbye forever then.
Those were my final words to Roger. Now, after that, the two of them were arrested and brought to trial. Because it was premeditated and involved an act intended to take a life, they were both sentenced to prison, even though it was an attempt. The Smith Family Clinic had to close due to Dr. Charlene's arrest. The previous director, despite his age, was writing referral letters for the current patients, which was quite a task. I truly apologize for everything. No, the former director has always been good to us. How did things end up like this? I said. Maybe my expectations were too high. The previous director said with a sad voice. I felt bad about receiving the compensation, but the former director made sure it was all paid. It will be hard for the two of you from now on. Since I'm closing the clinic, selling the equipment should bring in some money, he said kindly. Roger was also prosecuted. Since he wasn't the direct perpetrator but an instigator, he complained that a prison sentence was too harsh. Unfortunately, the law considers instigation a serious crime too. He was sentenced to prison as well. It was Roger's idea in the first place, and without him, Dr. Charlene might not have gone down that path. Then, the incident itself, being an attempted insurance murder of my daughter, made it into the local news. Because I was also a victim, it became difficult to continue living in the area. During such a time, Bro and Nancy suggested moving far away.
You know, we've decided to go into rural healthcare for a while. I'm a doctor and Melville is a nurse. It's a perfect fit. We've been thinking about moving far away together for a while, but the timing just never worked out. So, why don't you come with us?
They invited me. Maybe the incident made it hard for them to stay at the hospital. But they didn't mention it, which showed their kindness. So, I decided to take them up on their offer. After a while, we moved to another state. Even though it was rural, it was the kind of place where you could drive for an hour to get to a shopping mall. Basically, the town's clinic had no successor, and there was a period without a doctor. If you drove, you could reach a hospital, but having a local place you could rely on was important. Not everyone can drive, especially the elderly population. So, having a clinic within walking distance was greatly appreciated. Thinking about it, the Smith family clinic, the town's doctor, must have caused trouble for the community because of what Dr. Charlene did. When Bro and his wife settled in the new town's clinic, I was hired as an office worker. At first, they said they couldn't pay much because I lacked experience, but that didn't matter. After a work gap, I was just thankful to be able to do such a job part-time. With the divorce settlement money and child support, I could support my daughter. By the way, Sarah's health returned to normal, and she suddenly grew taller. Apparently, the arthritis was related to growing pains. I couldn't believe someone would exploit such a thing. Nowadays, she's thriving in sports in this sparsely populated area. I hope to live peacefully with Bro and his wife and my daughter as a new family from now on. I longed for a family. After a life of solitude, I thought I finally had one, but my days are filled with drudgery at their hands.
Work till you drop dead.
As I wither away, barely fed or rested, my husband adds insult to injury. In despair, I cry out,
Someone, help me!
My name is Lucy, a 29-year-old office worker. As my friends married off one by one and started popping out babies, my motivation kicked into high gear. After a desperate husband hunt, I tied the knot at 30. I wanted to get married in my 20s if I could, but I won't be greedy. I'm just grateful that someone married me, with my plain face and lack of redeeming qualities. My husband's name is John. He's not a fighter, as he decided to marry plain old me. John isn't an office worker, he helps out with his family's farm. They say farmers have a hard time finding wives, but I don't know if that's true or not. But apparently that was exactly the case for John, and he was so worried about not meeting anyone that he signed up for a marriage hunting website. Was it chance or fate that matched us? In any case, it was love at first sight, and we quickly started dating and got hitched. John is kind and dependable. If not for the farm, he'd have married much sooner. It's because he was a farmer that he was still single at 35 when he met me. I was moved, thinking that fate really does exist. But life isn't that sweet. Right after the wedding, I learned why John couldn't get married.
Quit your job and help with the farm.
These are the words he said just 3 days into our marriage.
What are you saying? You said I could keep working after we got married. I said you could keep working, but not at your current company.
What a selfish way of putting it. To me, stunned, John says,
My parents are getting old and don't have the energy. Farming is too much for me alone. Aren't married couples supposed to help each other?
Lucy, help me out here. John looked exhausted as he said it. I felt sorry for him, but I was torn, still attached to my job. But John was relentless. If you won't do farm work, then divorce is the only option. Faced with that, panicked me had already lost. I hate the thought of divorce within a month of marriage after finally finding someone. I made up my mind to quit my job. I was incredibly attached to that job. I loved it and wanted to keep at it. But family comes before work, I figured. There's a reason I feel that way. I never had a family of my own. The fact that I exist in this world means I must have parents, but by the time I came to understand things, they were already gone, and I was being raised in an orphanage. According to the staff, my mother apparently passed away from illness right after I was born. My father was still young and couldn't muster the resolve to raise me on his own. My parents had no relatives, so the moment my father abandoned me, my path to the orphanage was set. That's why I don't have a family. I love the other kids and staff at the orphanage, they're wonderful people, but they're definitely not family. I can't be spoiled, can't be selfish, can't be protected. I didn't have the environment that a real family would provide. My father would occasionally visit me at the orphanage, but only about once a year. It's a lot to ask a child to understand that this is their father, and he didn't know how to interact with me either. Despite our blood connection, we could never become a family. Maybe that's why I have an extraordinary longing for a family. And yet, the reason I couldn't get married until 30 was because I was desperate just to survive. Also, because I enjoyed my job. And now, I finally had a family. I figured it was better to let go of my job than to let go of that. I suppose my choice was already a mistake at that point. Before I knew it, time flew by. Years and years of non-stop work for 15 years. Before I knew it, I was being worked like a slave over and over again. The once kind John has retreated into the shadows, now transformed into a tyrant. The same goes for my parents-in-law. They work me like a slave. This is how my day goes. I wake up before sunrise and first prepare breakfast for the family. I immediately go to the fields to check on the crops. If there are problems, I deal with them. Even if there aren't, I patrol the vast fields alone. By the time I finish making my rounds, the sun has fully risen. Then I return home for a bit to clean up the dishes from the family's finished breakfast. I silently eat a single piece of bread, plain. Coffee and milk are strictly prohibited. I'm only allowed a single small glass of water. Then I immediately clean the house and prepare lunch. Once that's done, I maintain the farming equipment and check stock of necessary items like fertilizer. Then I check shipping arrangements with the agricultural cooperative and the prices with wholesalers for crops we've delivered. Then I check returned products and sales. There's just so much checking. By the time that's done, it's evening. I go to the fields one more time to check on things, then return home. When harvest season comes, harvesting work gets incorporated into this schedule too. And depending on the season, various other processes like sowing seeds and tending to the soil come into play. And then, once that's done, I go back to the house again to prepare dinner. After that, I clean the bath and the house. I clean up the dishes after the family finishes eating. There's no lunch, and dinner is just a cup of soup and some pickles. And still, only one glass of water. After that, I compile the income and expenditure calculations and necessary expenses into documents and submit them. I submit them to John and my parents-in-law. This is the first time John and my parents-in-law make an appearance, and you might wonder what in the world they're doing from morning to night. The answer is nothing. My parents-in-law, who were in their 60s when we first got married, are now in their late 70s. They had that tendency from the start, but now they say they're too old and it's physically taxing, so they hardly do any farm work. I haven't seen my parents-in-law go to the fields in the past few years. As for John, he's been living thoroughly lazy days. In the beginning, he taught me the ins and outs of farming, but once he finished teaching me everything, he declared, "Well then, I'll leave the rest to you." After that, John barely helped out at all. I'm essentially working alone. After I've been on the move from morning to night, finishing both housework and farm work, my parents-in-law take the documents I hand over and yell,
"Your work is too slow."
John also looks at the documents and,
"What the hell is this? Don't go increasing unnecessary expenses."
He scatters the papers at me.
"But this fertilizer is essential for this time of year. You could cut costs more, you incompetent fool."
15 years ago, both John and my parents-in-law were doing farm work. Their sense of time is stuck in that era. It's been 15 years, and with the impact of recent social conditions, the skyrocketing of fertilizer prices won't stop. No matter how much I appeal this, it doesn't get through to them, and they say,
"It's because you're incompetent,"
refusing to even try to understand. As a result, I'm told,
"There's no need to buy clothes for you. Keep wearing old clothes. Don't eat extravagant meals. 2 meals of bread and soup are enough for you. Work for the family. If you slack off, this family will fall apart."
And my meals are reduced to twice a day, just sliced bread and a cup of soup. I'm not allowed to take baths, and I just wipe myself with a wet towel every day. It's still fine in the summer. But in the winter, I've lost count of how many times I've gotten sick from that. However, no matter how poor my health gets, even if I'm running a high fever, I'm not allowed to rest.
If you rest, our income will dry up. Are you trying to drive our family to ruin?
John's yelling just echoes, and not once am I offered any words of concern for my well-being. Cold eyes, cold words, cold attitude, all of it conveys that both my parents-in-law and John see me as nothing more than a slave. In such a horrible environment, why don't I run away? I ask myself, but I can't find an answer. I can tell my own thoughts aren't working properly anymore. I'm surely numb. I know I should run. But the one time I brought up divorce, that was the only time John transformed. "Don't abandon us, Lucy. Without you, we're finished." Saying that, John's eyes welled up with tears. The family I sought and always wanted. Having finally obtained it, I couldn't bear to let it go, and at that point, I abandoned the option of running away. Call me foolish, I can't help it. I don't expect anyone to understand my feelings. I just want to protect my family, that's all. Unfortunately, at 45, I can no longer hope for children, but John and my parents-in-law are still going strong. And I have the crops that will respond if I work hard. The fact that I think this way probably means I'm already broken. I don't feel anything anymore, no matter what I'm told, no matter what I'm blamed for, even if I see my family living their lazy days. Every day, I just repeated the same things like a robot. But after 15 years of marriage, even I, in a state like brainwashing, finally realized. This situation is bizarre. I shut myself in my room after finishing a day's work. I can hear John's raucous laughter from the living room, and my parents-in-law yelling,
"Make us a late-night snack."
I feel I must obey my parents-in-law's orders, but my body won't move. There's a mirror in front of me. I haven't worn makeup in ages, but the vanity I've had since I got married reflects my face. In it, I see a version of myself that looks elderly. I gently place a hand on the mirror.
"Who is this?"
This is me. It's unmistakably me. Every day I was exposed to the sun's rays and made to work even in heavy rain. Working non-stop from early morning to late at night, I couldn't have nutritious meals. In that state, there's no way I could maintain a youthful appearance. Gently running my fingers through my hair, I find clumps of it falling out. I've reached my limit. I cover my face, feeling the urge to cry. But no tears come out. I'm dehydrated. And then, at that moment,
"I'm going out drinking, so give me money."
Suddenly my door burst open and John barged in, yelling,
"What? But what about your money?" "Obviously, I used it all up ages ago. Just shut up and hand it over." "Where's your wallet?" "That's for tomorrow's shopping." "You're just gonna waste it anyway, right? Better to not have it so you can save properly." "I'll use it for you."
John pulls money out of my wallet without giving me any say. I'm so thin and weak now, there's no way I could stop him.
"Oh right, I want champagne tomorrow, so have it ready."
Even after snatching money from my wallet, John still makes his usual extravagant demands. Where does he expect me to get money from? I'm at my limit. My muttered words don't reach John, and he leaves laughing. Maybe I should just leave this house. As soon as I think that, my unsteady body starts to move. Before I know it, I'm outside, and I've walked to the bustling city center. The pain in my feet brings me back to my senses. The lively downtown, dazzling neon lights, and the cheerfully laughing people passing by. It's like a different world. And then I face reality. Even if I leave home, where would I go? I can't go back to my old job now. Times have completely changed, and I know the work I used to do is no longer useful now. But having done only farming for so long, I don't have the courage to dive into a new field either. Is working in this house forever the only path left for me? I say path, but what I see in front of me is a sheer cliff. As I stand frozen, my mental state is pitch black. Still, to somehow survive, I suppose I have no choice but to return to that house. With heavy steps, I was about to head home when... "Geez, John, you drank too much." A woman's voice coming out of a bar made me stop in my tracks. I only thought that he has the same name as my husband, but I'm surprised by the person I see when I turn around. I instinctively hide behind a signboard and quietly peek, and there I see John. And with him is a woman clinging affectionately to his arm. John grins sloppily at the young, beautiful woman. What is that? My bewildered mutter doesn't reach John. The two don't notice me and start walking, so I hurriedly follow after them. I keep my distance so as not to be spotted and secretly tail them. The pleasantly drunk pair enters a hotel without hesitation. It's not the kind of hotel you stay at for a trip. It's a hotel for grown men and women. They must be used to coming here. The two enter without any hesitation, and I can only watch them go. What is this? Before I know it, tears are rolling down my cheeks. I've been worked to the bone from morning to night, telling myself it's for my family for 15 years. I've endured and worked hard for my tyrannical parents-in-law and the despotic John, and yet John steals money from me and cheats with another woman. He looks so happy, grinning from ear to ear at me, who has completely forgotten how to smile. This is too much. With the sensation that the ground is crumbling beneath me, I just keep crying. I don't remember much after that. I was in a daze-like state when I came to, and before I knew it, I had arrived home. My parents-in-law are already asleep, and the house is pitch dark. In the darkness, I return to my room without turning on any lights and sit down. My feet hurt from walking a long distance, but my heart hurts far more than that. I don't feel like doing anything and can't sleep, so I space out until morning comes. I know in the back of my mind what I should do. But I don't know how I should do it. Right now, I don't have money, of course, but I also don't have the will or energy to take action. Someone help me. Even if I mutter it, no one will help me. Desperate to survive, I hadn't really made any friends. My companions from the orphanage are all desperate to survive too. I can't consult with them. The staff at the orphanage are busy too. It's not a place I should rely on after leaving ages ago. At a total loss, I'm simply at my wit's end. In my room, documents have piled up into mountains. I still haven't been allowed to purchase even one computer, and the old-fashioned manual work is nearing its limit. More than that, my mental limit is nearing. As I'm spacing out, the sun rises, and my parents-in-law come yelling.
What are you doing?
Because normally, I should have long finished preparing breakfast and gone to work in the fields by now. My parents-in-law, who never move a muscle themselves, who claim they're too old yet seem more energetic than me, who never do a thing. These people made John the way he is. The world looks coldly upon me, having come from an orphanage. If I make the slightest mistake, I'm met with eyes that say, "I knew it." But do people really fail because they don't have parents? Then can you say John is a respectable person? Has John, who had proper parents and was raised with his family, become a respectable adult? The answer is no. Why am I, who lives earnestly, berated while John, who does terrible things, gets to laugh? I want to hurl these questions at my parents-in-law. The moment I think that, the front door opens and John comes home. In high spirits, John is tattled on by my parents-in-law.
Your wife is slacking off. Why haven't you prepared breakfast or done the field work? Get moving for the family.
Family? Is that woman also your family?
What?
You're cheating, aren't you? I saw you last night. Entering a hotel with a woman. I say it clearly, but John doesn't look the least bit guilty. Oh, so you saw. He says.
Well, of course I'd prefer a young, beautiful woman over an old hag of a wife who looks elderly, right? I want a divorce.
Oh, is that so?
And then what will you do after divorcing and leaving? That's, with alimony, I'll go somewhere.
Alimony?
I'm not paying a cent. You're not paying? I'm not cheating or anything. You just admitted it.
When was the last time I talked back so assertively? I desperately hold back, feeling like I'll be quickly shot down if I let my guard down. John laughs mockingly. Where's your proof?
Proof? I clearly saw with my own eyes.
As if that counts as proof.
Without photos or obvious evidence that anyone can see, don't think you'll get any alimony. That's... Not only that, this would be a divorce based on your own selfish reasons, so I'd be the one getting alimony from you. What?
I can tell my face has gone pale. I can't accept it, I think it's unreasonable. But what John is saying makes sense too. No matter how skilled a lawyer I hire, without proof, I can't substantiate John's cheating and can't claim alimony. If that happens, I'll be kicked out penniless and instantly be living on the streets. I had no knowledge of splitting marital assets at this time, so I could only envision the worst future.
That's awful. If you don't like it, get out. If you're not leaving, do the housework properly. Be grateful I'm letting you stay.
John pauses there for a moment. With a defiant smile.
You work until your very last breath for our family.
Saying that, he left the room with my parents-in-law.
Until the end.
All I can do is mutter to myself. The meaning of the end is clear. Until my life runs out.
Is my life going to remain that of a slave?
Tears that should have dried up start flowing again. The tears flowing from my emaciated, horrible state seem to chip away at my life.
How could this be? How could this be?
I cry out. I cry and cry, but still, the current situation doesn't change. Even when my tears dry up and I'm in a daze, my world still doesn't change. Should I just disappear somewhere like this? Rather than being worked to the bone until the very end, I might as well. As I think that, a nostalgic name catches the corner of my eye. Is this an envelope? The sender's name is that of the orphanage. Buried in a mountain of documents, I hadn't noticed its existence. Wondering what it could be, I open the seal, and inside is a letter. Amazingly, it's a letter from my father. My father, who used to visit me at the facility when I was a child, gradually stopped coming as I grew older, and eventually, we stopped seeing each other altogether. That's why I never told my father about where I worked after leaving the facility or anything else. Naturally, my father doesn't know I got married either. This is a letter from him. Not knowing my whereabouts, my father sent it to the orphanage, and the staff forwarded it to the address they had for where I married into. Thinking, what could he want at this point? I open it, and inside are surprisingly warm words. The letter from my father starts with an apology. When I entered adolescence, I became irritable every time we met, and he no longer knew how to interact with me, so he found it hard to visit. It was an apology for not being able to do anything for me. Furthermore, he was posted overseas for work and spent over 10 years abroad, so he couldn't contact me. After those apologies, he asks about my recent situation. Are you doing well?
I'm sorry for being a lousy father. At this age, I finally feel like I've mustered up the resolve to be a parent. If you're having any troubles, please contact me. As your father, I'll do everything I can. I know it's too late and I wouldn't blame you for being angry. But still, I am your father. I wish for your happiness, Lucy.
As I read on, tears fall onto the letter. I think he's selfish. I think the father who abandoned me after Mom passed away is selfish. But surely, my father must have struggled too. Rather than raising me without any confidence, I'd be happier in an orphanage. I understand now that my father was thinking of my happiness in his own way. Now that I'm an adult, my rebellious phase is over, and I can understand how difficult it was for my father. Surely, my father was also grief-stricken when his beloved wife suddenly passed. My father loved my mother so much he couldn't recover from the despair. And now, my father has finally recovered, is facing reality, and trying to face me. He's trying to be a father. That made me happier than anything. My father, who wishes for my happiness, is concerned about my current situation and cares for me. I feel like the distance between my father and me up until now is melting away. Before I know it, I have a phone in my hand. I don't have a mobile phone. There's only the house phone. I'll get yelled at if I use it without permission, but it seems John is out again and I don't sense my parents-in-law's presence, so they must have gone out too. Now's my chance. I dial the phone number written after "Please contact me if anything comes up." My heartbeat is loud. I can tell I'm nervous. I make the call even though I don't know what I should say. After a few rings, a nostalgic but slightly aged voice, my father's voice, reaches my ear.
Hello.
The moment I hear it, everything I had been thinking of saying is blown away. Tears spill out.
Hello? Who is this?
Well.
What?
Before I know it, words have left my mouth. Help me. Lucy? I didn't say my name. The last time I met my father was around the end of middle school, I think. My voice should have completely changed now that I'm an adult, but my father remembered. He noticed. Dad. Lucy. It is you. What's wrong?
Dad, please, help me.
Skipping over greetings like long time no see, and everything else, I yell. I yell and break down crying.
Please, Dad, help me.
John and my parents-in-law returned home late that night. The three of them were quite drunk, so they must have been out drinking, making me work while they live the high life. But they better be prepared, because their reign is about to end. Half a month after the phone call with my father. Sooner than I expected, my father contacts me. And then, my father comes to the house. On the day my father is coming, I don't wake up early as usual and sleep in until the time when I would normally have finished preparing breakfast. I'm woken up by the sound of my room's door being pounded on violently.
Lucy, how long are you gonna sleep? Don't screw around. What about breakfast? The field work?
Even as he pounds, the door doesn't open. Because I secretly put a lock on it. To John, who's tyrannical as always, I retort. Can't you prepare your own breakfast at least? How refreshing that moment is. I finally talk back with the retorts I've been holding back all this time. But John, not backing down, shoots back.
Since when did you get such a self-important attitude?
My parents-in-law, who are probably beside John, also say,
If you don't want to be kicked out, hurry it up.
with their usual self-important attitude.
If you keep living such lazy days, you'll go senile.
When I say that,
Cheeky brat.
is the response I get.
This feels great.
As I hole up in my room like that, it starts to feel like they might break down the door. They want to work me to the bone that badly? They hate moving themselves that much? I'm amazed. But just as I thought the door might seriously be reaching its limit, the doorbell rang, signaling a visitor. Inside the house, John and my parents-in-law are tyrants, but it would look bad if people found out they were bullying their daughter-in-law. Especially in the countryside, where many of the neighbors are also farmers. John stops yelling too and goes quiet. My mother-in-law, Mary, hurries to get the door. She's still spry enough to run, I see. Mary shouts,
Hey! Some rich-looking man is calling for Lucy. What? For Lucy?
As John says that suspiciously, I forcefully open the door.
Yes, I'm coming. Lucy!
I shake off John, who's trying to stop me in a panic, and run to the entrance. Where did I, malnourished and emaciated, get that kind of strength, you ask? It's an adrenaline rush. And I'm light because I'm so thin. Dodging John's hands, I headed for the entrance.
Dad!
There stood my father. Actually, I've met with my father several times since that phone call. Because John and my parents-in-law never come around during farm work. It's easy to secretly make time to meet. I got yelled at for not being able to do my share of the work, but John and my parents-in-law don't know I've been meeting my father.
What? Your father?
John, who chased after me to the entrance at the sound of my voice, widens his eyes.
That's right.
I answer and turn back to John.
Let me introduce you. This is my birth father.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for always taking care of my daughter. What? Oh, you're welcome.
I told John when we first met that my father is alive, but we've become estranged. John must have completely forgotten about the existence of my father, whom I haven't seen once in the past 15 years. And now he's suddenly appeared right in front of him. It's no wonder he's surprised.
But why is Lucy's father here all of a sudden? It's not sudden. We've been in contact many times. With this mobile phone. What? When did you get a mobile phone? Dad gave it to me.
That's right. As soon as I reunited with my father, he got me a mobile phone. He said he would pay for it too, so I gratefully accepted his offer. Thanks to that, I could contact him without John or my parents-in-law getting suspicious, and we could meet frequently.
What? When did that happen?
John, was it?
You're Lucy's husband? Yes.
You're quite the stutterer, John. But it's understandable. My father, dressed impeccably in a suit, has a dignified air about him. He exudes the aura of someone who's climbed the corporate ladder and become an executive. And? John freezes at my father's question.
What? What do you mean, and? Why is my daughter so terribly emaciated?
John is surprised by that question. Of course he is. We rarely run into neighbors in the countryside, but when we do, they worry about how skinny I've become. And how much I've aged. John and my parents-in-law brushed it off to acquaintances, saying it's her constitution, but...
It seems Lucy has a constitution that makes it hard for her to gain weight.
He seems to intend to get away with the same excuse. But that's naive.
Is there any constitution that makes someone this emaciated?
A thunderous rebuke. At my father's rebuke, John's legs give out and he falls on his behind. It certainly is intimidating.
No matter how you look at it, this level of skinniness must mean there's some health problem. Don't you think to have my daughter see a doctor? We've been busy. You can only be busy if you're alive. What do you think my daughter is? I'm sorry.
John can act tough against weak me, but he's awfully meek against someone stronger than him. My eyes are cold as I watch John turn pale.
By the way, I could hear you screaming at my daughter to make breakfast and do farm work. What was that about?
Next, my father glares at my pale-faced parents-in-law.
Our son's wife, your daughter, is always thinking of slacking off. I've had a chance to tour your fields a few times, but was I imagining that my daughter was the only one out there? Tour? When did you? Is there a problem with a parent observing their daughter's workplace? No, well, is there? No.
Even my parents-in-law are getting pushed back by my father's forcefulness. In my mind, I'm giving my father a standing ovation.
Amazing. Dad, you're wonderful. I want to do that too.
I had been completely weakened by 15 years of brainwashing, but I've become quite energetic since reuniting with my father. I'm still emaciated, but since my father started treating me to meals and I began getting proper nutrition, I can think clearly. So I can't just leave everything to my father. Or rather, I want to speak up like him. Dad,
Lucy, here's what we discussed.
Thank you. As if remembering, my father hands me a thick envelope.
There's so much here. Reading it all would be.
As I'm bewildered.
You only need the top 3 pages or so,
he says, putting me at ease. I take them out, give them a once-over, and a defiant smile spreads across my face. I look up from the documents at John's face.
What is it?
To the perplexed John, I lift my hair and flash a smile. Behold, this supple hair. My hair that had been falling out like crazy from malnutrition is now supple and beautiful like it once was. It may be difficult to get it back to how it was in my youth due to my age, though. Still, it's on a different level from my hair quality just a little while ago. And so, having fully appreciated the beauty of my hair, I show John the documents.
My father is an executive at a large company and has quite a few connections. One of them is with a detective agency, and he had them investigate your conduct.
What? Yes, let's take a look here. Can't you see it?
Has all that fooling around made your eyesight go bad? What did you say?
I, who has good eyesight from continuous farm work, will show you.
This here is the results report on your infidelity investigation, supervised by the detective agency. What? You can't understand just from a few long words lined up? No way.
In other words, this is proof of your cheating.
What? You can stop saying that. In just this past half month, more than enough evidence has been gathered, so I'd like to hire a lawyer and proceed with divorce. Any objections? Major objection. I'm not getting divorced.
Why?
If we get divorced, I won't be able to live like this having fun. Stop having fun and work.
15 years. It's been 15 years. 15 years since we got married, and I've endured through it all. No matter what was said to me, I endured and endured, enough to explode many times over. The anger I unleash as a result must make for a terrifyingly demon-like expression. In fact, John's face has gone pale just from looking at me. It's nothing compared to earlier when he went pale at my father's rebuke.
Now, Lucy, are you saying you're going to abandon us old folks? Were you that cold of a daughter-in-law?
Oh my, Mary.
If you're calling me cold, then just how cold are you all for working your daughter-in-law to the bone? Antarctic level? Arctic level?
Which one is it?
Well, Antarctica and the Arctic are just as cold, aren't they?
Wrong. Antarctica is colder.
So if I'm Arctic level cold, that means you people are Antarctic level cold, doesn't it? That's such a complicated analogy. If you don't get it, don't laze around.
Work and study.
If I work, will I understand the difference between Antarctica and the Arctic? Okay, enough about Antarctica and the Arctic already. You're the one who brought it up, Lucy.
I cut off the conversation, saying I've had enough of the analogy. And then I turned back to John again. I crouched down in front of John, who's still sitting on the floor, and peer into his face. At my sharp gaze, emaciated but having regained a strong spirit, John lets out a small scream from the back of his throat. So, John.
Lucy, your face is scary. Regarding your infidelity, there is irrefutable proof. Stop dragging out the end of your sentences. It's scary.
You'll agree to a divorce, yes?
With a lump sum alimony payment, of course. That's a problem.
What? No, I got it. I'll pay the alimony and divorce you. Faced with me looking like a demon from hell, John, now teary-eyed, nods and agrees to the divorce. I stand up, exasperated, and look behind me. Where I look, my father is giving a thumbs up. So I flash a big smile and give a thumbs up too. As for what happened after that, well, it's pretty obvious, but to sum it up, John and my parents-in-law were ruined. Thanks to the skilled lawyer my father introduced me to, the divorce went through without a hitch. And then there's the matter of the lump sum alimony payment to me. The bunch who lazed around and spent all the money I earned obviously have no ability to pay. As a result, they paid with the money from selling the house. It's too little compensation for the long period of 15 years, but I'll let it slide since making them suffer has meaning. The three of them ended up taking shelter in an old apartment. If they worked hard and earned money through farming, they could probably return to their former lifestyle soon. But after 15 years of thorough laziness, my ex-husband and former parents-in-law had completely forgotten how to do farm work and their bodies could do nothing. It was their first time doing farm work in ages, starting not from square one but from the negatives. Naturally, they couldn't do it properly at all, and the crops ended up in a miserable state. Almost none of it was at a level that could be shipped out, and even when it could, there was a storm of complaints about the quality being too different from before. As a result, they had to close down the business. The shock caused my former father-in-law to collapse, and Mary developed dementia. They were sent to care facilities in the blink of an eye, and then they really ran out of money. My ex-husband is apparently leading a hellish life in debt. He contacted me once asking for help, but I just thought as if I care, and that was that. We're strangers now, after all. I've met with my real father many times since then. Even though he's getting on in years, he's still energetically doing his job. He's so cool. Our discord hasn't completely disappeared, but I want to take our time and slowly mend our relationship. When we meet, there's still an awkward feeling between us, but I'm sure that will go away soon too. I can feel my father's love, and I cherish him too. I'm sure this is what a real family is. As for what I'm up to, I've used the alimony I received to make a fresh start. I've begun a new life in a new home. I'm not in perfect health yet, so I'm just working part-time, but I want to gradually become able to do a proper job. Already 45? No, I'm still 45. My life is just beginning.
Call an ambulance, quick. How can you be so oblivious?
Suddenly, Brittany, who lives next door, rushed into my apartment in a panic. It all started when Tony collapsed in the bathroom. Lately, Tony never parts with his mobile phone, no matter where he is in the house. In fact, he even takes it to the bathroom, apparently talking to someone. Why she, living next door, knew in real time that he had collapsed in the bathroom is beyond me. Honestly, there's no reason for her to call me oblivious. I already know why she is connected to him, and how she knew immediately about his collapse in the bathroom. They might think it's a secret, but there have been many suspicious moments in the past. It's funny they don't realize that they're the only ones who don't notice. I've turned a blind eye until now, but I've decided to put a stop to it. They've been having their way, thinking I've been silently watching. Of course, I plan to retaliate against Tony, but I also want Brittany to suffer just like me. They shouldn't think they can get away with this. It's time for them to pay for 13 years of betrayal. I'm Rosetta, a 40-year-old housewife. I met my husband Tony through a mutual acquaintance. At my age, I long to marry and build a warm home. A friend suggested I meet Tony, saying it wouldn't hurt just to meet. I was all work and no play, with no chances to meet anyone. Watching my friends get married, I wondered what life with someone I loved would be like. Thinking it was just a meeting, I said yes, only to find an unexpectedly great connection. Our hobbies and topics of conversation matched, and our conversational pace and rhythm felt incredibly comfortable. It was as if we had met before, and I wanted to see him again. I had dated a few men before, but none with whom I could talk so freely. My first impression of Tony was of a caring man, always putting me first. I quickly fell for his ever-present kindness.
Rosetta, I thought this would suit you. What's this? It's not my birthday or our anniversary. Can I open it?
Please do. Inside the box he handed me was a beautiful lemon yellow dress.
It's lovely. I've never worn a dress like this. I wonder if it suits me. It's definitely going to suit you, Rosetta. I want to see you in it here.
Here? I'm a bit nervous. I quickly tried on the dress.
Yeah. The size is just right. It suits you as I thought. I'm happy. Thank you.
He nodded with satisfaction as he looked at me. Though kind to me, I sometimes caught a glimpse of his stern side. It was mostly during work-related calls. Even on dates, he'd occasionally receive calls and issue instructions. I'd find myself admiring his commanding presence. He, a manager, seemed to be always busy, even on his days off. It must be tough getting work calls even on your day off. Well, it's not too bad. But it can be tough dealing with incompetent subordinates. Oh, we should head out. Our restaurant reservation is coming up. Laughing, we hand in hand, hurried to the restaurant we had reserved. I wanted to marry a wonderful woman like you. Will you marry me? If it's with you, I'd be happy to. Please take care of me from now on. I felt happy to be able to marry him. But this happiness, I soon realized, was fleeting. I intended to continue working as a nurse even after getting married. But things seemed to be heading in a bad direction. About the housework. I plan to continue working, even though we're married. Is it okay to ask you to help when I have night shifts? His expression then turned grim. You intend to continue working? Yes, is that a problem? It's a bit. Not right for a woman to keep working after marriage. Nowadays, it's not uncommon for couples to be dual income. In reality, there are more households around me where both partners are working hard as dual income couples than those with just a housewife. Even after hearing my reasoning, he insisted I should quit working after marriage, so I asked him why. I thought there must be some reason from his perspective. Believing it's important for spouses to understand and compromise with each other, I decided to ask. Ever since college days, I've been coming back to a dark room and turning on the light alone. Tony, you've lived alone for a long time since college, right? The moment the room lights up and I realize I'm alone, I just hate that feeling. His expression seemed to darken for a moment.
So that's how you felt. I lived with my family for a long time, but I guess living alone can make you feel that way. That's why I want you, Rosetta, to quit your full-time job. Of course, I'll work in your place. There's even talk of me becoming a director soon. Really? A promotion at this time? That's amazing.
Then, scratching the tip of his nose awkwardly, he replied. Whenever he feels shy about something, he fiddles with his nose and breathes heavily. He looked at me as if expecting more praise, so he must have been really happy. He always prioritized career advancement, working hard to be recognized at work, so this honor must mean a lot to him.
It's not a big deal for someone like me. But there are only a few among my peers who have become managers, so I guess my progress is relatively fast.
Proudly saying this, I felt a hesitation beside him. Sensing my indecision, he leaned in and said,
You're not going to cling to your job when I, your husband, am asking you this humbly, right?
I was speechless at his expression, one I had never seen before. It was unbelievable, and instinctively, I felt I shouldn't meet his eyes anymore, a strange sensation. Being told this, I felt I had no choice but to quit. I wanted to continue a bit longer, but I decided to resign, considering it was my beloved husband's request. Life as a housewife, starting with our marriage, was harder than I expected. I thought being a housewife meant doing household chores, but it was extremely busy. Taking advantage of me being a housewife, Tony stopped doing any housework.
Women's workplace is like the home, right? It's wrong to just rush through work to have your own free time.
I couldn't talk back to him when he said this in a stern tone. In the morning, I prepared breakfast and helped him get ready for work, timing it with when he woke up. Until he returned at night, I finished all chores like preparing dinner and cleaning the bathroom.
Tony, breakfast's ready. I'll be right there.
He sat down at the table, looking around leisurely and sighed deeply.
You know I went out for a work-related drink last night, right? Yes, I thought so since you came back late. What about it? If I went out for drinks, shouldn't the breakfast be Eggs Benedict? I'm sorry, I didn't consider that.
Then he, tapping his finger on the table, silently glared at me. He was particular and would strongly point out anything that differed even slightly from his preferences.
Hey, is this where the vase was supposed to be?
A normal vase placed beside the TV stand. I bought it thinking it would add a nice touch to the home since he likes flowers. I haven't decided exactly where to place the vase, but I wonder if something went wrong.
The vase? I moved it a bit since it was blocking the TV view.
Tony clicked his tongue and glared at me.
With this angle, it blocks the view of the painting from my seat. A masterpiece obscured by flowers, what were you thinking? So selfish to prioritize watching TV. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Try to understand the feelings of a man who's dealing with such a selfish woman.
He kept blaming me relentlessly. Hearing how inadequate I was, I started to strongly believe I was a terrible person.
Rosetta, you've always lived at home and only worked as a nurse, so you might not understand, but society isn't so kind, you know? Being limited to the medical world like that.
When he said this, I started to feel anxious, wondering if my narrow perspective was causing him discomfort.
You say you're a doctor or nurse, but in the end, you only know a narrow world, don't you? Yes, I suppose. I've been working at the same company for 30 years since graduating from college, so I'm good at sensing these things. I'll teach you, so be sure to pay attention.
Honestly, I felt that continuing as a nurse would have been far better. His relentless sarcasm often lasts for 2 to 3 hours. Showing any sign of displeasure means starting all over again with the lectures, so I'm not even allowed to look upset. I focused solely on giving answers that would satisfy him or nodding as if I were listening. While it's possible to ignore Tony's sarcasm, there's another issue that's been bothering me for a while. Brittany, our next-door neighbor. She seems to be a successful influencer, and her voice can be heard every night during her broadcasts. Despite living in a well-insulated condominium, the sound leaks through, indicating she must be playing at a very high volume. I've been troubled by this noise since moving in 13 years ago and have complained 2 or 3 times. Remembering those times still makes me angry. Since those complaints, it seems I've been marked as an enemy in her eyes. Every time we pass each other, she clicks her tongue at me. Although it's a regular occurrence, it's still unpleasant to experience every night. Don't you know what kind of person the neighbor is? He looked at me sharply when I asked. Is there a problem with the neighbor? I hope it's not trouble with them. No, it's not trouble, but the noise. I was wondering if there's something we could do about it. I don't think it's a big deal. Just don't confront the neighbor directly, okay? Saying that, he ended the conversation and drank his beer. I haven't brought it up since. Tony often comes home late at night due to his busy work schedule. I try to wait up for him, but sometimes I fall asleep. One night, I thought I heard Tony's voice and tried to get up, thinking he was home, but I was too sleepy. I needed to get up quickly to avoid making him angry. However, when I got up, I couldn't see him anywhere. Huh? Didn't he come home? I could hear Tony's voice, but where was it coming from? Listening closely. It seemed to be coming from next door. It also sounded like he was talking to someone, but was he talking to Brittany? Why would his voice be coming from Brittany's apartment at 1 a.m.? Feeling uneasy, I decided to use some savings I had hidden away from my working days to hire a detective. I never thought I'd be the one to hire a detective. What the detective found was unexpected. However, I still felt it wasn't the right time to confront Tony with this evidence. As the year-end approached, I had a bad feeling. With the long holiday break around the corner and the unpredictability of what might happen on the last day of work before then, I felt a bit heavy. That year-end, Tony came home a bit early from his last day of work before the long holiday, seemingly in a good mood. He had been drinking and was more relaxed than usual. Lately, he'd been irritable and taking it out on me, so this was a bit of a relief. Welcome home, Tony. You're home early today. Yeah, it's the day before the break, so I had a few drinks with colleagues. I see. Must have been tiring. Looking at the fridge, he asked for more alcohol. Hey, I'm not done drinking. Get me something. It was a good thing that he was in a good mood, but his face was clearly flushed from drinking too much. Your face is all red. Haven't you drunk a bit much? Drunk too much? Are you saying I can't hold my liquor? Alcohol is essential for office workers. I'm not weak to it. Saying that, he quickly drank the beer he was holding. He doesn't particularly like beer. He used to boast about how well he could drink, but I've had to pick him up from bars countless times. Despite his grand claims about being a corporate drinker, I always end up taking care of him when he's drunk. Man, I've sweated a lot drinking tonight. I'll take a quick shower before bed. Saying this, he took his mobile phone to the bathroom. He never used to bring his mobile phone to the bathroom, but lately, he doesn't let it out of his sight, even there. He even takes it with him to the bathroom, which makes me wonder if there's something he desperately doesn't want seen. Thinking about this, I decided to keep an eye on the situation. From the bathroom where he went, I could hear him talking on the phone. The conversation was too quiet to make out, but I wondered what could be so important to discuss in the bathroom. Then, a loud noise came from the bathroom. Shocked, I rushed there and found Tony, looking pained, curled up in the bathtub. Just as he regained consciousness and tried to get out, he collapsed again, unconscious. I quickly checked his condition. At that moment, someone was furiously banging on the door. The banging was so intense, I thought the door might break. It's a rental, and having someone break the door isn't exactly a laughing matter. And who could it be at such a critical time? Yes, I'm a bit busy right now. When I opened the door, it was Brittany. Move! Get out of the way! I couldn't comprehend why she would show up right now. She pushed past me, making a beeline for the bathroom without any hesitation. Wait! What are you doing? Tony, what's wrong? Tony! Ignoring my astonishment, she took charge of the situation. She acted as if she were the wife, which was bizarre.
Call an ambulance, quick. How can you be so oblivious?
I couldn't let her continue her reckless behavior. There was only one thing to do: confront her with reality. I just stood there, looking down on them.
Call an ambulance? And you think you have the right to order me around? What do you mean?
Just what I said. Do you think you, of all people, have the right to give orders to me, his wife? She seemed taken aback by my retort. As if it was unthinkable for me to talk back.
If you're so concerned, why don't you call the ambulance? No, I can't, that's why I'm asking you. Think a little, will you?
Suddenly she got angry and objected. I guess so. She snapped back angrily, obviously because it would be embarrassing for her as the mistress to have stormed into the house in a panic. She's probably afraid of a call revealing the affair. She's flustered to make a call, just staring at Tony lying there. I couldn't help but laugh.
You can't even make a phone call? That's just pathetic.
My words seemed to anger her.
What do you mean, pathetic? Are you mocking our pure love?
Her belief in their pure love, despite being just an affair, was terrifying. Focused solely on themselves, their blindness was almost enviable, but this wasn't the time for that.
If you're really concerned about him, making a call should be easy. You should be able to do it.
I challenged her to make the call, showing her the phone. If she really could, there should be no problem. Furious, she glared at me, her face red with anger. Tony seemed to regain consciousness from our voices. He was unconscious, and even when he woke up, he still seemed to be in a lot of pain. He was still in pain, struggling to speak.
My head hurts like it's splitting. Call an ambulance.
He looked extremely pained, his usual composed expression gone. I remarked,
It must be hard. We really should call an ambulance, shouldn't we? What are you waiting for? Do it now.
Right. Something needs to be done quickly. Ignoring his words, I decided to take action. Leaving him rolling in agony, I silently left the house. I took the waterproof-packed mobile phone that had fallen in the bathroom, so he couldn't call from his phone. Brittany and Tony, now awake, seemed relieved and were leisurely affirming their love for each other. Blind to everything but themselves, they didn't even notice I took the phone. I couldn't deal with this foolish, cheating couple any longer. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to leave the house. I immediately left the house and contacted Brittany's boyfriend, Robert. Robert is Brittany's boyfriend, with whom she has a relationship serious enough to consider marriage. He stays over about half the week, so they're practically cohabitating. I've run into him a few times in the hallway and at the garbage disposal area. He's a doctor working at a nearby hospital. I remembered receiving his business card before.
Good evening. Sorry for calling so late. It seems Brittany is at my place for some reason. Could you come and pick her up?
Is this Rosetta? Long time no see. You're saying Brittany is at your place? What do you mean by that? His voice over the phone sounded confused. Understandably so. Anyone would be surprised by a sudden night call from their girlfriend's neighbor.
I'll explain the details later. Are you at work right now?
No, I've just finished work and am killing time at a restaurant near the workplace. Brittany said she had a stream tonight and asked me to come back late. So, Brittany had been making sure not to let Robert stay at her place. She was casually talking to Tony over the phone while Robert was away.
Can you come as soon as possible?
I'll head over right away. Let's meet at the condominium entrance.
Thank you. I'll join you there.
3 minutes after the call, he arrived at the condo's entrance, and we went to my apartment together. On the way, I briefly explained the situation.
To put it bluntly, it seems Brittany and my husband Tony have been having an affair for many years.
What? What do you mean?
I found out through investigation. They met in a service store 13 years ago and have been involved ever since.
Robert was visibly shocked by my words. 13 years? Since that long ago?
Yes. She moved into the apartment next to ours by chance 2 years ago.
No way. Then what am I? I thought we were going to get married. He was struggling to come to terms with the reality of being cheated on. It would be so understandable, considering his marriage plans.
It seems to be for money. I suspected my husband's infidelity and hired a detective. The investigation results indicated that.
That's unbelievable.
Brittany rushed into our apartment when Tony collapsed in the bath. Apparently, they were talking on the phone even in the bathroom.
He seemed deep in thought but then looked at me.
That explains it. No wonder she never lets go of her phone. But you said Tony collapsed. Is he all right? He's fine, just drank too much. No danger to his life.
After explaining briefly, I led him to my apartment. Entering quietly, they were still engrossed in their melodramatic scene.
I'll fight against the world for you, Tony.
Having such a beautiful woman love me, I'm blessed. This must be a trial from God to reach true love. In the 10 minutes it took me to leave, contact Robert. Within the short time, an epic story seemed to have unfolded. A tragic tale of lovers who can't swear eternal love to each other. I was surprised Tony could spout such cheesy lines. Glancing at Robert beside me, he looked indescribable, seemingly shaking from the cringeworthy dialogue. Unable to bear it any longer, Robert dropped his bag, alerting them to our presence.
What's going on here? Robert, why are you here?
Strangely, both were naked, which was comical.
Why? That should be my line. You told me not to come home early because of a stream. Was it for this?
Normally mild-mannered Robert raised his voice, and Brittany seemed a bit taken aback.
Well, that's because, the fans and antis are troublesome. I was worried about what would happen if they found out I have a boyfriend.
Brittany looked evasive. I knew Robert only from brief exchanges in the apartment complex. He never seemed like someone who would raise his voice. Indeed, he listened calmly when I explained everything to him earlier, showing his ability to control his emotions. So, for Robert to react this strongly, she must have really crossed a line.
Stop taking people for fools. To think you've been secretly having an affair with the neighbor for 13 years.
She suddenly became defensive, her eyes darting around. I thought maybe I'd marry Robert. Is that bad? She tried to look innocent and appealing, but it only backfired with Robert.
We were cohabitating because we talked about marriage someday, but now I just can't believe you.
Brittany, realizing Robert was genuinely angry, quickly switched tactics.
No, this is a misunderstanding. I was just teaching him about streaming, like personal training for the digital age.
Brittany seemed to think we knew nothing about influencers or video streaming, and was clearly trying to bluff her way through. Despite her desperate attempts to wriggle out of the situation, Robert wasn't having any of it.
Private lessons, is that it? Have you already forgotten what you yourself said earlier?
I played the cheesy dialogue I had secretly recorded at high volume.
Hey! You recorded this without me knowing? That's a violation of privacy. Delete it now.
Privacy? You have no right to talk about privacy.
I'm filing for divorce.
Tony, clearly not expecting me to initiate a divorce, was panicking.
Divorce? How are you going to live without me? You're living off me, and now you're talking about divorce? Have you lost your mind?
He seemed to think I would break down and beg him. His male superiority mindset was apparent, still in disbelief over the current situation. His absolute confidence baffled me, but it didn't matter anymore.
Say whatever you want. You can only act tough for so long.
Eventually, we got divorced. After the incident, I immediately sought a lawyer who is an expert in divorce and infidelity cases. Presenting the evidence video helped me demand more than the usual alimony. Meanwhile, Brittany's engagement with Robert was called off, and she now lives a secluded life. This is partly because her streaming blew up after the affair scandal. Right after the infidelity news broke, fans analyzed Brittany's posts, exposing her relationship with Tony. The fan's sharp eyes discerned details from subtle reflections and background elements in her posts. The posts and their hints led to the discovery of her affair with him. The scandal affected Tony too. His company received numerous calls, forcing them to acknowledge the situation. He was fired, for his company took the situation seriously. The company must have wanted to get rid of the trouble. I guess so. After all, a high-profile influencer's affair with a married corporate employee from major enterprise was criticized heavily. When the company's stock dipped around the time of the scandal, they couldn't ignore it any longer. Now, he struggles with the public's disdain and rarely goes out, a consequence of his own actions. He's often the subject of online posts, making it risky for him to venture outside. I ran into Brittany once after the turmoil. She appeared as if waiting for me while I shopped at a grocery store near my workplace.
How come you're living comfortably off a big settlement while I suffer? Isn't that unfair?
Her audacity was typical.
There's nothing unfair about it. It's all the result of your actions. I have nothing to say to you. And what's with your high and mighty attitude? Because of you, my engagement was broken off.
She approached me, growing more agitated.
I was so close to marrying a doctor. Just stop it, will you? You've been secretly having an affair while engaged, and yet you're playing the victim. I can't understand your logic. You should mind your behavior. What do you know? You're the one who's the talk of the internet now. If someone sees this, it'll end up online again.
Realizing the risk, Brittany quickly covered herself with her hood and left in a hurry. Since separating from Tony, I've been enjoying my single life. Living at my own pace is wonderful. I've returned to my nursing job, surprisingly recalling much of my previous knowledge. Surprisingly, my body seems to remember, and I am able to do a certain amount of things. Though I once doubted my future, I now live a fulfilling life, forgetting Tony and Brittany as my form of revenge.
Something feels off.
I try to pinch my cheeks to ward off the sudden wave of sleepiness, but it's utterly ineffective. There wasn't anything particularly exhausting about today, just a meal at my in-laws. And I'm not usually short on sleep. Why then, I wonder drowsily, when I hear my husband's laughter.
Good night, LOL. I'll make sure you have sweet dreams.
My name is Lila. A 24-year-old office worker, newly married to Riley, who is 5 years my senior. We met through a friend and, after dating for 2 years, were happily married. We had a grand wedding recently and received blessings from many people. Just as I was dreaming about our happy married life ahead, an unexpected misfortune struck. Emerson, my mother-in-law, suddenly fell ill and passed away in no time. Emerson was cheerful and very kind, delighted when I first went to greet her.
Nice to meet you, I'm Lila. Oh, what a joy to have such a lovely woman as my son's wife. I've always dreamed of having tea time with my son's wife. I'd be delighted. Please, let's have tea time together.
Though I was nervous, Emerson welcomed me with a full smile, making me feel at ease and fond of her. We had planned to have tea time together after the wedding settled down, but that dream was shattered with Emerson's passing. We were busy with Emerson's funeral, sorting out her belongings, and handling the inheritance, finally settling down a year later. Then, I got a call from Trevor, my father-in-law.
Layla, how about a meal at our house next weekend night? I'm thinking of ordering takeout. Yes, of course. Thank you.
So, I was invited to dine with Trevor next weekend night, along with Riley. Trevor ordered Singaporean cuisine, which he loves, and we enjoyed the feast. The three of us gathered around the dining table. It was my first time trying Singaporean cuisine, and everything was delicious. Except the soup tasted oddly. Curious, I asked my husband.
Hey Riley, doesn't this soup taste a bit strange? That's just how this dish is. You're not used to Singaporean cuisine, haha.
Though Riley laughed it off, I couldn't stomach the soup, so I avoided it and ate the other dishes. Then, I felt Trevor's sharp gaze.
Lila, I went through the trouble of ordering this, so make sure you drink the soup.
Startled by Trevor's outburst, I hurriedly gulped down the soup. It still tasted weird. The strange taste spread throughout my mouth, and I tried to cleanse my palate with water and other dishes. Gradually, my vision blurred, and I found myself slumping over the table. What's happening? I'm incredibly sleepy. This isn't good. I'll really fall asleep. I need to stay awake. As my consciousness faded, I could hear Riley's laughter.
It seems to have worked. Dad, is that thing ready? Of course, it's all set. It's in the dresser drawer in the bedroom. The new ones are amazing, only 0.01 millimeters thick. We didn't have those when I was young.
Realizing Riley and Trevor were discussing contraceptives, I felt a sense of danger but then lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. What happened? I murmured groggily.
Oh, thank goodness. You're awake.
Looking towards the voice, there was our neighbor, Luella. Luella immediately called the doctor, who explained that I had been given a large dose of sleeping pills.
Sleeping pills? So that's why the soup tasted so odd.
Then, I learned from Luella.
Your dad and husband ran off in the car, so I accompanied you in the ambulance. I'm so glad you woke up safely. Really? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble. But what do you mean Dad and my husband fled in a car?
Actually, Luella found out that the fire alarm was ringing at my in-laws' house and it wouldn't stop, so she decided to check on them. When she rang the doorbell, Trevor came out. Yes.
What's going on, ringing the fire alarm like this? It's been going off for so long. Haven't you found the source yet? This is serious. I'm coming in. Please, it's okay. Don't come into the house.
What are you talking about? We're supposed to help each other out in times of need. Luella said that, barging into the house, and found me lying listlessly in the living room.
Oh my! You've collapsed from inhaling smoke. This is terrible. I need to call an ambulance right away. No, this is different.
Trevor and my husband tried to deny it hastily, but Luella was convinced I had collapsed from smoke inhalation and called for emergency and fire services on the spot.
Lila is just sleeping.
That's right. My wife is just tired and sleeping. There's nothing to worry about. Despite their desperate explanations, Luella objected.
It's strange that she won't wake up with such a loud noise going on. I'm worried. I wonder if the ambulance will arrive soon.
Luella was frantic. Before we knew it, people had started gathering. Riley and Trevor began to sweat profusely. Soon after, Riley and Trevor hurriedly jumped into a car and fled, leaving me behind. That's why Luella ended up accompanying me in the ambulance. Such a thing. Thank you so much. I expressed my gratitude to Luella. Then, when I told the doctor about the conversation I heard between Riley and Trevor before losing consciousness, he grimaced and made a call, and I was informed that Riley and Trevor were also admitted to the same hospital.
Riley and Dad are hospitalized. Why?
Apparently, after fleeing the house in the car, Riley and Trevor were driving frantically to get as far away as possible. As a result, the car Riley was driving crashed into the wall of a mansion, causing an accident. Both were brought to this hospital by ambulance, severely injured with broken bones, but their lives were not in danger. Hearing the reason for their admission, I was overwhelmed with anger, disgust, and various other emotions.
They got what they deserved. I'll never forgive them.
I decided to hire a lawyer and sue over this incident. Then, sleeping pills were detected in the soup bowl I had finished, and Riley and Trevor were arrested for assault. The news even reported on the incident. Later, during the police investigation, they were rearrested for attempted rape. Trevor was stressed from being busy with Emerson's funeral and other matters, becoming frustrated. He was planning to visit a nightclub, but when Riley found out, he made a proposition to Trevor.
Dad, if you're that frustrated, I can lend you Lila. But in return, give me Mom's kimonos. Eh? Really? I'd be thrilled to be with young Lila, but... Why Mom's kimonos? Are you running out of money? Yeah, I kinda blew through my savings.
Riley had squandered his savings on gambling and offered me in exchange for Emerson's kimonos, which came from a distinguished family and were valuable. Riley knew this and proposed the trade to Trevor.
Lila doesn't know I'm hooked on gambling. I've used quite a bit from our joint savings account, so I want to cover it up before she finds out. I see. But I can't imagine Lila agreeing to be with me. That's okay. I have a good idea. You still have some of Mom's sleeping pills, right?
Emerson had been prescribed sleeping pills for her insomnia before she passed away. With those sleeping pills remaining, Riley and Trevor concocted their plan. They decided to dissolve powdered sleeping pills in the soup and proceed after I had fallen asleep.
Perfect plan, right? This way I get money, and Dad's frustration is relieved. It's all good. Right. Let's invite Lila over for a dinner party next weekend.
However, their scheme was abruptly foiled by the ringing of the fire alarm, leading to the foolish outcome of causing an accident in their haste to flee in the car. It turns out Riley and Trevor are hospitalized in the same room.
Damn it! How did it come to this? It was supposed to be a perfect plan. If only the fire alarm hadn't gone off. In the end, we couldn't do anything with Lila and ended up getting seriously injured. What a mess. Damn it!
As they openly wept and voiced their grievances, a nurse visiting their room informed them with displeasure. I had demanded compensation through a lawyer in the divorce proceedings, but both of them flatly refused to pay any settlement for the divorce.
To demand compensation from me, her husband, in a divorce trial. Nothing actually happened, so it should be fine. That's right! In the end, all we did was give Lila sleeping pills and nothing else.
Both their reasoning left me and my lawyer utterly dumbfounded. Even when told that administering sleeping pills without consent is unacceptable, they wouldn't listen at all. Moreover,
Hey! Lila! Tell the police not to sue me and Dad. If the victim asks for a non-prosecution, the police won't sue, right?
They had the audacity to command. How low could they possibly be? I continued to ignore them, but they persistently demanded not to sue and to ask for a lighter sentence. However, their demands suddenly stopped at one point. After giving orders every day, it was strange for them to suddenly cease. Curious, I decided to investigate. It turns out they had encountered a serious problem. The owner of the mansion whose wall was destroyed when Riley and Trevor crashed into it was furious and had demanded they pay for the repairs. The damage was extensive, so the cost of repairs was significant. Moreover, my husband had lied, saying,
We were rushing to the hospital because Dad was suffering from an illness, and that led to the driving mistake.
However, the incident was reported in the news. Upon learning the truth, the mansion owner became even more enraged and insisted on receiving both the repair costs and compensation from the divorce trial. As a result, Riley and Trevor seemed to have bigger problems than just dealing with me.
It wasn't on purpose. Please forgive us. We beg you.
Riley and Trevor were pleading, but the mansion owner was unforgiving. They were told they must pay no matter what. Since the mansion owner hired a lawyer, Riley and Trevor also had to hire one to handle the situation. Since I had a lawyer as well, the compensation for the divorce was smoothly negotiated between the lawyers. Given their clear wrongdoing, our demands were almost fully met. I also demanded and received the money Riley had misappropriated from our joint savings account. Although I hadn't noticed his gambling addiction, I remembered how his overtime had suddenly increased at one point. Probably, he was lying about working late and going to pachinko instead. And so, I naturally proceeded with the divorce from Riley. The negotiations were handled by our lawyers, and though initially reluctant, Riley agreed to the divorce when I firmly insisted. Riley's lawyer played a significant role by convincing them that they were in a very unfavorable position and needed to show sincerity. Later, I went to thank our neighbor Luella again.
Thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude. Oh, I didn't do anything special. It's good that you're safe. Perhaps Emerson was looking out for you. Emerson, you say? What do you mean?
After I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the firefighters came and checked the cause of the fire alarm. However, the only source of fire in the house was a candle on Emerson's altar, which no one should have lit. This wasn't enough to trigger the fire alarm, indicating a possible malfunction as there were no other signs of fire.
Maybe Emerson is always watching over you? She was so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law,
Luella told me with a smile. It might have been a coincidence, but even so, I felt a warmth thinking about Emerson's kind smile. After expressing my thanks to Luella again, I headed to a certain cake shop. This shop sells a chocolate cake that I've always loved. When I had promised to have tea time with Emerson, I wanted her to try the chocolate from this cake shop. After buying sweet buns, I went to the florist to buy flowers that matched Emerson's cheerful image, with a fresh impression, and headed to visit her grave. Offering the flowers and chocolate at the grave, I expressed my gratitude to Emerson.
Dear Emerson, thank you so much. Your help saved me. Though I've divorced Riley, I will always love you, Mom.
I wished I could have talked more with Emerson. I wanted to have that tea party.
This chocolate was meant to be shared with you, Emerson, during our tea time. It's really delicious.
Just then, the wind blew softly. Feeling as if Emerson had responded, a tear fell from my eye. But thinking that crying would worry Emerson, I lifted my face, smiled, and said,
I'll visit again, Emerson,
and moved on. I decided to take the chocolate back with me later, as I couldn't leave it at the grave. On the way home, I felt incredibly refreshed. Despite everything, I vowed to live energetically from tomorrow on. Returning to single life, I threw myself into work more than ever before. Riley and Trevor, with their complex fractures, seem to still be in the hospital. The owner of the mansion is trying to collect the repair costs before they are discharged and sent to prison, and it seems they had to sell their car and belongings to pay back the money using their savings. Physically and mentally devastated, and with prison time awaiting them. They are experiencing a living hell. I hope they reflect deeply and pay for their crimes once they are discharged and sent to prison. Since then, I've been visiting Emerson's grave regularly, updating her on my life. Having had enough of love for a while, I've decided to enjoy being single and am studying hard to earn new qualifications. I plan to live every day without regrets. My husband called me disgusting for my severe morning sickness, looking down on me with cold eyes.
You're the one who threw up and made a mess, right? Hurry up and open the window to air it out. If the smell sticks, you're paying for it. Just because you find it hard to go shopping or cook doesn't mean morning sickness isn't an illness. Don't be so stupid. On top of that, as my morning sickness got worse, my husband left me at home and went on an overseas trip with mother-in-law, Audrina. That was the last straw for me, and I began to plot my revenge. A week later, my husband called, furious. I laughed it off. Since you told me to clean the house, I did just as you said. Got a problem with that? I'm Kimberly, a 28-year-old office worker. My husband, Eamon, and I live in a detached house and both work while we've recently become pregnant. While I was happy,
My morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't go to work on some days. Fortunately, many at my workplace were understanding.
Once you get through this, it'll get easier, so make sure to rest and take care of yourself.
They gave me some time off when I was considering quitting. So, I spent my days at home, resting as much as possible, eating when I could, and doing household chores. The problem was my husband. He practically stopped doing any housework at all.
You're always at home, right? Even a pregnant woman can clean, so at least do that.
While my husband used to do household chores when we were both working, he stopped doing anything since I took my leave. Even when I said I couldn't do it because of severe nausea, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he compared me to other pregnant women he had seen, saying,
"Just being lazy and slacking off in the name of morning sickness."
Furthermore, he was extremely averse to me vomiting. The first time I vomited at home, I didn't make it to the toilet and ended up using the living room trash can. Seeing this, my husband, pinching his nose, hurried me to ventilate the room and kept yelling at me, even though my nausea hadn't subsided. Although I vomited into a plastic bag in the trash can, so the can itself wasn't dirty, he made me dispose of the bag and then threw the trash can away.
Hey, what's with that attitude? Why are you telling me to open a window when I'm vomiting? You could open it yourself. And I properly sealed the double bag before throwing it away, so why throw out the trash can in front of me as if to make a point?
Disgusting, smelly, don't talk.
Even if it's in a plastic bag, droplets might have gotten on the trash can.
After that, no matter what I said, don't talk because it's smelly, he wouldn't even listen. I started to consider divorce. Maybe once my morning sickness settled down and I could go back to work, my husband would return to being the kind and helpful person he used to be. But could a husband who hurled such abuse at me while I was suffering return to how he was? Or was this his true nature? As I worried, my morning sickness only got worse. With nausea hitting me multiple times a day, I started carrying a plastic bag with me everywhere in the house to vomit without my husband seeing and dispose of it. However, one time, I didn't manage to dispose of it in time, and he saw me with the bag.
"Don't touch anything, all right? You're paying for the sofa you just sat on since you're going to dispose of it because you dirted it."
He looked at me with utter disgust. When I impulsively brought up divorce, I noticed he was holding a pamphlet in his hand. He spread it out to show me.
"In about 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip overseas with Mom. We plan to stay for about a week. Don't slack off on cleaning just because I'm not here. Keep the house clean." "What? What are you thinking?"
While looking at me coldly, my husband laughed in a low voice.
"I don't want to stay in a house you've made filthy. The morning sickness should settle down in about 3 weeks, right? By the time I'm back from the trip, it should be nearly over, so clean the house in the meantime."
Fine. I'll give the house a thorough cleaning. The next 2 weeks were tough for me. He doubled down on doing nothing, even eating strongly scented meals or spraying harsh perfume around the room despite my pleas because it made me nauseous. Despite locking me in the bathroom, he'd bang on the door furiously and yell if he wanted to use it himself. This lifestyle continued. I immediately informed my parents that I had decided on divorce. Since my husband's attitude changed, I had been discussing it with my parents, who must have realized from my words that convincing me otherwise was no longer possible. They told me to come back home immediately. However, just divorcing and returning to my parents' home wasn't enough for me. I was determined to teach my husband, who lacked any awareness of being a father and thought nothing of the individual differences in pregnancy and morning sickness, a lesson. 2 weeks later, I saw my husband off with a large carry-on bag. These 2 weeks were the peak of my morning sickness, and I had lost more than 2 kilos. If it continued like this, I would end up hospitalized due to severe pregnancy sickness. Seeing me visibly thinner, my husband still called me dirty and, after repeatedly ordering me to clean the house, fled like he was escaping. I stayed at the entrance until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and made a phone call. A week later, I was leisurely sitting in my parents' living room when calls from my husband kept coming in. Calls from my husband kept coming in one after another. After watching for a while, my parents started to panic, so I reluctantly answered.
Don't mess with me. What the hell is this? Explain.
I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear at the sound of my husband's loud voice the moment the call connected. Still, I sighed at the loud enough voice and listened to him.
I can't get into the house. What's going on? Don't change the locks on me while I'm away.
The real estate agent changed them. It's kind of gross to have the same keys as the previous tenant for the next one, right? So, they changed the locks when selling the house. Huh? Real estate agent? Oh, didn't you see the sign? It's right there next to it, for sale. There was silence on the phone for a while before the angry voice came again.
What are you doing on your own? Who gave you permission to sell it? Why are you selling it?
You said the whole house smells. So, I cleaned the entire house, including that. And why would I need anyone's permission to sell my house?
Your house. That's not right. That house belongs to your grandfather. It's a crime to sell it without being the title holder.
That house was given to me, I remodeled it, and it's in my name. You can't just sell it if you're not the title holder. Indeed, the house we lived in belonged to my grandfather. However, after my grandfather passed away, I, still single, remodeled it into its current form, and after getting married, my husband moved in to live together. My husband was momentarily speechless knowing the title was in my name, but quickly changed his approach.
That house is where I live too. You can't just kick out a resident like that. It's illegal to sell my stuff. Besides, it was our house since we lived there as a couple, so it's not just your house anymore.
Unfortunately, that house was in my name before we got married. We never changed it to a joint title after marriage. Plus, I moved all the stuff out after, so your things are all safe. I did dispose of the sofa you said was smelly, though. My husband seemed panicked by the mention of moving out his belongings. He was asking where and when. It's at your grandmother's house. After all, you're away with Dad gone and no siblings. There was nowhere else to send it but your grandmother's when you went overseas with Audrina. Hearing his belongings were at his kind grandmother's house seemed to calm my husband for a moment, but his voice quickly filled with anger again.
So, you're the kind of woman who sells the house and dumps the belongings while her husband is on a trip. I'm divorcing you. I'll sue for compensation in the divorce court because of this.
It's a relief you're the one bringing up divorce. I don't want you to come to the house anymore, and I'll be heading there with my lawyer soon. So, goodbye. I wonder if my husband truly believed he could win if he took it to court. I calmed my panicking parents while contacting a lawyer. A week later, when I went to what my husband calls his in-laws' house, Audrina slapped me before I even entered the door. I had expected it and deliberately received the slap.
Because of you, the house is a mess. A woman who can't even do housework because of a little morning sickness is useless. Pay the compensation in the divorce court and let's divorce.
As I was rubbing my stinging cheek, planning to retort to Audrina, she saw someone behind me and her face twisted. I thought you showed no remorse, but to strike immediately upon meeting is something else. Behind me was Carol, my husband's grandmother, looking furious. Hello. I'm really sorry for sending the belongings over so suddenly the other day. That's all right. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have noticed at all. I had come to the in-laws' house, which was now the home of my husband's grandmother who had kindly accepted his belongings. When I sent my husband's belongings, I included a letter of apology detailing everything about our situation. As a result, the grandmother was furious with her grandson's husband for hurling terrible words at his wife suffering from morning sickness and leaving her to fend for herself. She was equally furious at Audrina for going on an overseas trip with him without admonishing such behavior. The grandmother, now 80 years old, is a gentle figure to her grandson but a disagreeable mother-in-law to Audrina. Since Audrina married into the family, her relationship with the grandmother, due to their clashing personalities, has always been like cats and dogs. Sure enough, Audrina, upon suddenly facing the grandmother, twisted her face in obvious annoyance, which only fueled the grandmother's anger further. After briefly addressing the shouting match between the two, I entered the house. There, my husband stood, dumbfounded next to the grandmother and Audrina. It might have been shocking for my husband to see his kind grandmother and mother arguing so fiercely. However, wanting to discuss matters with my husband without Audrina's interference, I had informed the grandmother of my visit in advance. And we started the divorce negotiation with my lawyer before Audrina could return. The process didn't take much time and ended smoothly. The compensation amount my husband had prepared for the divorce court and its basis were systematically dismantled by my lawyer, leaving him speechless. After a thorough division of assets and agreeing not to approach me except when visiting our child after its birth, my husband readily agreed, and our marriage ended abruptly. As I was leaving the house, the grandmother and Audrina were still standing next to each other. I addressed them briefly before departing, but they seemed too heated in their argument to pay me any mind. Subsequently, I began receiving a barrage of complaint-like emails from my ex-husband. Apparently, he became annoyed with the grandmother coming to the in-laws' house and meddling. Imagining my former husband and Audrina, who had shouted at me so boldly, becoming meek in front of a petite grandmother, finally brought me to laughter. However, the nature of my ex-husband's emails soon shifted towards seeking reconciliation. Every day there's shouting. They both ask me what I think when they're fighting, dragging me into it, and it's annoying. It's a lifetime request. Please, let me stay at your place. I'll do household chores or anything. I won't do anything terrible again, and I'll never say it. I want to meet our coming child too. I love you. I want to remarry you. I responded mechanically. I will not reconcile. As for the child, you can meet if you pay child support. And left it at that. Eventually, the messages from my ex-husband ceased. Apparently, unable to bear the living conditions, he left Audrina and went somewhere. Not providing any support, Audrina, not yet of pensionable age, is scraping by on her savings. Audrina herself contacted me with this news. No one's helping me. Please, I want to stay at your place. I only went on the trip with my son because he invited me. I had no idea you were suffering so much from morning sickness. She claimed, lining up convenient excuses over the phone, but when I threatened to report her to the police, the calls stopped. Apparently, the grandmother also refused to help, and Audrina, limited by her savings, began working part-time. Thus, she no longer had the energy to call or email me. However, the altercation between the grandmother and Audrina that day is well known throughout the neighborhood, and they saw me deliberately receiving Audrina's slap. Consequently, the neighbors have distanced themselves from Audrina, leaving her to live uncomfortably in her home. Seemingly unable to afford renting a new apartment, she spends her days diminishing in stature. Yet, living alone in a rent-free house should be manageable on a part-time income. My morning sickness has finally subsided, and I no longer vomit. The doctor, learning of my divorce and the circumstances around it, scolded me for accumulating too much stress, which wouldn't help in healing. Though I had been consulting with my family, the stress from living with an uncooperative ex-husband for a while, and dealing with real estate agents online to sell the house, had been too much on my body, and I reflected on this. Moving forward, I plan to avoid stress and return to work. Anyway, I'll be taking maternity leave before giving birth, planning to live at my parents' house. Now, Imagining the appearance of my unborn child brings me immense joy. As the days go by, my anticipation grows, and I can hardly wait to see what kind of child will be born. No matter what, I intend to raise my child with love.
Please, help me.
The voice of Mia on the phone was so frantic that I had never heard. She was supposed to be on a plane to Hawaii with Ethan by now. Was there some kind of trouble? I braced myself.
Our house. Our house.
What? Our house? Mia wasn't on the plane. Learning the truth, I resolved to send Ethan, who had been missing, to hell. I'm Lily, a 32-year-old corporate employee at a major trading company. My husband Ethan is a year younger than me, and we got married 3 years ago. He works for a big corporation too, and is quite handsome by any standard. I didn't choose him for his looks or salary, but he's been nothing short of perfect as a spouse. I've been happy we married early. Our marriage was smooth sailing, but then, out of nowhere, Ethan quit his job recently. According to him, he couldn't give up his dream of becoming a writer and needed to submit lots of manuscripts for competitions to debut. I told him, "You can write after work on weekdays or on weekends." But my words fell on deaf ears. Instead of focusing on his health after quitting, he's been mostly sleeping at home, almost like he's unemployed. Hey, if you're going to be at home, at least do some housework. If I do the housework, I'll have no time to write my manuscript. You're just sleeping all day anyway. I was fed up with this repetitive argument. Not working, not doing house chores, just sleeping. My patience with Ethan was wearing thin, and I started considering divorce. But thinking about my good income, Ethan's remaining savings, and most of all, Mia, Ethan's mother, who was overjoyed about our marriage, made it hard to take that step. Mia raised Ethan alone and dotes on him as he has no siblings. She was thrilled about our marriage, treating me like her own daughter. However, since Ethan quit his job, Mia started to act awkwardly around me. She often didn't respond to my messages. It was clear she was avoiding me, and I couldn't figure out why. When I asked Ethan, he just said it would be best to leave her alone, not taking it seriously. Gradually, I too started to dread contacting her, deciding to just observe as he suggested.
At least do the house chores if you're not working. I'm doing all the work and house chores, while you just sleep all day.
That day, my anger finally erupted. Ethan was talking about a deadline for some competition, but he wasn't acting like it. He complained about me being slow to prepare lunch while I was working remotely. I couldn't stay silent after that. It turned into a fierce argument. You're always working too, never make a decent meal. What, should I just not eat?
Your lazy behavior without working is only possible because I'm out there earning our living expenses, right? Your savings hardly make a dent in our costs.
Being called out for not working and being supported by me, Ethan's face turned red with embarrassment and he started shaking. I thought if he got violent, I'd leave the house right away, but thankfully, that worst-case scenario was avoided. Without saying a word, Ethan stormed out of the house. Watching him leave in his casual clothes, with just his mobile phone and wallet, making deliberately loud footsteps, I felt like I was looking at a petulant child. The only place he could go in that getup would be his parents' house. I thought of warning Mia in advance about Ethan possibly causing trouble, but, as usual, she didn't answer her phone. He sneaked back home later that night, but from that day on, our conversations dwindled, and he started avoiding me, going out more frequently. For an unemployed Ethan, his destinations were limited, usually his parents' house, and sometimes I'd find receipts from internet cafes. I tried to initiate conversations several times, but each time, he would escape to his room or just leave the house. I gave up on repairing our relationship and started preparing for a divorce. I thought it best to inform Mia about the divorce. I sent texts and made calls, but got no response. Even when I asked Ethan that something might have happened to her, he just said she was fine. Considering how often he visited his parents' house, I believed him, but I started doubting his whereabouts. I could just ask Mia how often he visits her, but I couldn't get in touch with her. I thought about investigating his whereabouts myself, But with work and household chores, I didn't have the time or energy. Returning home after a late-night overtime shift, I found him fiddling with something in front of the closet.
What are you doing up so late?
Welcome back. Actually, I'm planning to take Mom to Hawaii tomorrow, just packing for the trip.
Tomorrow? That's quite sudden.
Unconcerned by my surprise, he happily packed the luggage. I knew Mia always wanted to go on a trip. After Ethan's father passed away when Ethan was young, Mia devoted herself to working and raising him alone. She rarely even went to the department store, let alone on trips. I remember her saying that with a wistful smile.
This month, Mom turns 60, so I thought I'd fulfill her long-standing dream. Mia's turning 60 already. Yeah, that's why I've been working part-time lately, saving up money for this. But there's a bit of a problem.
He looked up at me.
I've got enough for Mom's part of the trip, but I'm short for my half. I've been saving, but it's not enough. So, I was wondering, Lily, could you help out a bit? Is that okay?
He looked at me with a pleading expression, radiating charm as if refusing him would be unthinkable.
So, you're saying I should pay for your part?
Startled by my unexpectedly cold tone, he hastily shook his head.
No. Just lend me the money. I'll pay it back after the trip. And you're not going to fail to pay me back because you can't find a job, right?
I glared at him, and he looked suspiciously guilty. I was astounded by his audacity.
I won't do that. Trust me, I can even write a commitment form if you want.
All right, let's do that. I pulled a piece of paper and a pen towards me.
After the trip, you'll get a full-time job and start paying it back. No part-time jobs, understood?
He grudgingly agreed, though he seemed reluctant.
And if you can't pay back, we'll divorce. We'll settle it in court with a third party.
Divorce? He looked visibly unsettled. Maybe the reality of divorce hit him hard. Still, when I insisted I wouldn't lend him the money unless he agreed to these terms, he reluctantly accepted. I wrote down the conditions and the amount, and had Ethan sign it.
Make sure you pay it back.
I know. I made a copy of the agreement and handed it to Ethan. It might be a good idea to show it to Mia if I get a chance. Feeling exhausted, I left him by the closet and went to bed. I intended to see him off, but he must have left early. When I woke up to go to work, he and his luggage were already gone. Thanks to yesterday's overtime, my workload today was light. I could finish my work in the morning and take a half day off. I planned to enjoy life without Ethan to the fullest. After finishing my work in the morning, I was having lunch, wondering if he and Mia were on the plane by now, when my phone started ringing loudly. Thinking it might be a work call, I answered without checking the caller.
Good, you picked up.
It was Mia's voice, desperate and strained, not at all like someone in the middle of a luxurious Hawaiian vacation.
Mia, what's wrong? The trip? Have you already arrived in Hawaii? Hawaii? Trip? I don't know what you're talking about. Please, come over. The house, our house, it's about to burn down.
Mia's plea was almost a scream. In the background, I could hear the sound of fire trucks and orders being shouted. Though I puzzled, I quickly agreed to come and hurriedly finished my lunch and headed to her house. When I arrived, the smell of smoke filled the street, and flames leaped high into the sky.
Mia!
I rushed towards Mia, who seemed on the verge of collapsing in front of her burning house. She looked up at me with a pale, distant face and murmured faintly, "This house is done for." Led by Mia's gaze, I looked up at her house, burning and crumbling before us.
It spread from the house next door. The wind was strong, and the fire spread quickly, they said. We didn't even have anything flammable.
Numerous fire trucks were on the scene, fighting fiercely against the flames, but her house was engulfed, showing no signs of being saved soon. The wind was strong, occasionally sending sparks flying our way.
It's dangerous here. Why don't we go to my place for now? You won't be able to enter the house even after the fire dies down.
Mia looked at me, hesitating. her face showing a reluctance to be involved with me.
I somehow understand you've been avoiding me. But we can't just stand here forever.
After my words, she finally agreed to move. We hurried towards my home.
By the way, what was that about a Hawaii trip? I thought you were off to Hawaii with Ethan today.
Ethan said that?
Yes. He said it was to celebrate your 60th birthday.
I haven't heard a word about it. We were both confused by our completely mismatched stories. It was a misunderstanding arranged by Ethan.
Ethan told me that you were pushing all the housework onto him and going out with other men. He even said you were trying to borrow money from me, and I should avoid contacting you. That's all lies. When the fire spread to the house, I couldn't reach Ethan by phone. I thought you might know where he is. I never imagined he'd be on a Hawaii trip.
I couldn't fathom why Ethan would lie to keep me and Mia apart. But for Ethan, keeping us disconnected probably served his purposes.
Mia, it's all a misunderstanding. Ethan quit his job to become a writer, but he never writes. He doesn't do housework and just sleeps all day.
Oh, so we've been deceived by him. Perhaps she has been harbored doubts about Ethan. She readily accepted my words. If Ethan hadn't gone to Hawaii with Mia, had he taken the money for two and gone alone? Or maybe with someone else? Anyway, nothing could be done until he returned from his trip. I'll confront him thoroughly when he gets back. That night, Mia and I spent a long time talking, catching up on everything we'd missed. The firefighters had informed us that it was inevitable that the house burned down, so she agreed to stay at my place until she found a new home. The more we talked, the more Ethan's web of lies unraveled. It was unbelievable how he had badmouthed me, even though I was handling both work and all the housework. Mia kept apologizing to me. But it wasn't her fault, it was Ethan's. We waited for Ethan to return.
What's this all about?
For days later, Ethan, oblivious to everything, cheerfully returned home, only to be dragged by Mia and me to the remains of Mia's house. Ethan was speechless in front of the burnt-out house.
Ethan, you lied to Mia and me, and leisurely went on a Hawaii trip while everything burned down. Lies? What are you talking about?
He was visibly shaken and unsettled. Before I could say anything, Mia stepped forward.
Ethan, aren't you ashamed? Lying to Lily to get money. Who did you go on the trip with?
Her anger was fierce, and I involuntarily stepped back. At first, Ethan tried to retort, but the glares from both Mia and me left him speechless.
Wouldn't it be better to just admit it? If we go to court like the commitment form says, you'll lose immediately. I haven't said I won't pay it back yet. You never intended to, right? I know about your real job, Ethan.
He glared at me, trying to hide his panic.
What are you talking about? Rent a boyfriend. Did you enjoy your trip with your client? If your company finds out, you'll be fired for violating the rules.
At my accusation, he gasped. Mia had told me about his secret job the night she stayed at my place. She didn't know what he did, but she mentioned he often came to her house with envelopes bearing a store's logo. Relying on her memories, I found a Rent-A-Boyfriend website. Though his mouth was covered with a heart stamp in the pictures, it was clearly Ethan, and he seemed to be quite popular in sales.
I admit I've been working, but the trip was different.
As he tried to resist, I showed him the screen of my mobile phone. He looked at the image and stood there, stunned.
That dumb woman. It was a disaster that you went on a trip with her.
On the screen was a photo of Ethan lying on a Hawaiian beach, smiling next to an unfamiliar woman. The date was from 2 days ago. The woman, mistaking Ethan as her real boyfriend, had probably uploaded the photo to social media. Apparently having no idea about the photo, he hung his head in defeat. With evidence laid bare, there was no escape for him. Ethan, trembling, fell to his knees.
Please forgive me.
I looked at Ethan's apology with a cold gaze. Mia, too, looked at his disgrace with a chilly stare.
Sorry, but I have no intention of forgiving you.
I brushed off Ethan as he begged for forgiveness, insisting that he was sorry. I turned to Mia. who continued to glare at Ethan with anger in her eyes. Ethan had been working secretly as a rent-a-boyfriend, and most of his earnings were lost to gambling. I confronted Ethan about his secret purchases of lottery tickets after he promised to work harder, and I decided to file for divorce. We agreed that he would pay back the borrowed travel money with interest. Mia, realizing his earnings as a rent-a-boyfriend, demanded he contribute to the rebuilding of her house. Though the fire had started from the neighboring house, its rapid spread was partly due to Ethan's actions. Apparently, he kept all the things he couldn't bring to our house in his room at Mia's house. This included stylish clothes for his rent-a-boyfriend job, scented candles, and trinkets that women like. His room was so filled that Mia had warned him several times, but he angrily refused to let her in, almost becoming violent. She tried to avoid his room as much as possible. Before leaving for his trip, he had rummaged through his room to get ready, leaving the dusty window open. He forgot to close it, and after the fire started, sparks flew into the room on the wind, quickly engulfing it. If he had closed the window or kept his room tidy, the fire might not have spread so badly. Although the neighboring house was primarily to blame for the fire, Mia, fueled by her anger at being deceived, demanded that he should compensate her at least partially. Ethan, intimidated by Mia and my collection efforts, apparently had been making quite a lot as a rent-a-boyfriend. He bragged about being able to pay off the debt easily, but he was fired from his job and faced a lawsuit for damages. At his rent-a-boyfriend agency, it was forbidden to go on overnight trips with clients. Meeting them without the company's knowledge and posting about dates on social media were also against the rules. He broke all these rules, leading to his dismissal. A client who had chosen him became furious after seeing the social media post from the woman he went to Hawaii with. This led to a loss of regular clients, and the company sued him for damages. Having once earned a high income as a rent-a-boyfriend, he was disillusioned with normal job salaries and struggled to find employment. However, he was eventually forced to use his savings and take part-time jobs to pay off his debts to various parties. Mia decided to live with me until her house was rebuilt. She took over the household chores, freeing me up from my busy work schedule. On weekends, we enjoyed movies together. Once my major project at work is completed, I plan to take a long vacation and fulfill her wish to go on a trip. Although I divorced Ethan, Mia and I found we had a lot in common and would like to maintain our good relationship.